Apple Podcasts, YouTube or GBNews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you and a very happy Friday. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, with his popularity ratings at an all-time low, Keir Starmer has jetted to the USA to offer British armed support to Ukraine. Vladimir Putin has issued an ominous warning, saying that will be a declaration of war. GB News will be live from Washington, D.C. as the Prime Minister faces his first major international test. And next, in a bid to plug a projected £100 billion black hole in the NHS budget, the Labour Party is planning to ban fast food TV ads before the 9 p.m. watershed. Following their outdoor smoking ban, is this a sensible nudge towards a healthier nation, or is it Starmer's nanny state on steroids? Up next, the UK's first new proposed coal mine in 30 years has bitten the dust after the High Court slammed its net zero credentials. Climate campaigners are claiming a huge victory, but locals say this means dole, not coal, with thousands of well-paid jobs going up in smoke. And Donald Trump live at 5 p.m. today. The former president has sensationally rejected another TV debate with Kamala Harris. Well, at 5 o'clock today, Trump will deliver a highly anticipated press conference to tell us why he believes his time will be better spent attacking the Democrats on immigration and the economy. And that's all coming up throughout the show. Well, to show, always a pleasure to have your company. Before the general election, the Labour Party promised they would tread lightly on our lives. Well, they've axed the winter fuel allowance. They're banning outdoor smoking. Now they're going to ban fast food ads. Seems they were telling us whoppers. What next? Sugar taxes, fat taxes. Do you think the government is just poking its nose into your business far too often? Let me know your thoughts. gbnews.com/yoursave. And next time for your headlines, and here's Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. The top stories. First to news from Sunderland, where a man has become the first person convicted for rioting in the city during the recent UK-wide unrest. Kieran Usher admitted to charges at Newcastle Crown Court after CCTV captured him leading violence during the Sunderland riots on the 2nd of August. Footage showed the 32-year-old masked, throwing missiles at police and inciting others to join in. The violence caused significant damage to local businesses and forced police to briefly retreat. 7 men who committed a string of child sex abuse offences against 2 teenage girls in Rotherham have been jailed for a total of 106 years. The men were all convicted after a 9-week trial, which was the result of an investigation by the National Crime Agency called Operation Stovewood. The victims, who were aged between 11 and 16 at the time of the offences and were both in care, were groomed and often plied with alcohol or cannabis before being raped or assaulted. They would often be collected by their abusers from the children's homes where they lived at the time. Over the course of the hearing at Sheffield Crown Court, the 7 men were handed jail sentences between 7 and 25 years. In other news, the presenter Jay Blades, best known for his role on the BBC's The Repair Shop, has been charged with controlling and coercive behaviour against his estranged wife. Court documents have revealed his charges include physical and emotional abuse. The 54-year-old appeared in court this morning and he'll appear in court again on the 11th of October. Russia's claims against 6 British diplomats of espionage and sabotage are completely baseless, according to the Foreign Office. The FSB security service claims the diplomats' actions prompted the response amid what it called numerous unfriendly steps by the UK. It comes as the Prime Minister meets Joe Biden, the US President, in Washington to discuss Ukraine's request to use Western weapons on Russian soil. Concerns over escalation have delayed approval for Ukraine's use of the ballistic missiles. Now, what would have been the UK's first coal mine in 30 years is now in legal limbo as planning permissions been quashed by the High Court. Climate campaigners argued the decision to grant planning permission for the Whitehaven coal mine in Cumbria smacked of hypocrisy and contradicted the UK's climate commitments. The government had withdrawn its defence, but developer West Cumbria Mining still contested the claim. However, in today's ruling, the judge said giving the go-ahead for the development was legally flawed. The prison population in England and Wales has dropped by over 2,000 in just 1 week following the start of the government's early release scheme. Today's figures the first to be published since Labour's plan took effect, reducing the number of prisoners to just over 86,000, down from a record 88,521. Under the scheme, implemented this week, about 1,700 inmates were freed, who'd served 40% of their sentences. On the 22nd of October, it will be the turn of those with sentences of 5 years or more, but the government insists it won't apply to most serious offenders, such as killers, rapists and terrorists. Robert Jenrick, the leading candidate for the Conservative Party leadership, is proposing to drastically limit the number of migrants entering the country. The former immigration minister told our political editor Christopher Hope that he wants to see a cap of just a few thousand people per year if the Conservatives win the next election. He discussed what he called a more controlled and restrictive approach to immigration on Chopper's political podcast.
Except that what I'm arguing for will not be plain sailing. It requires a big change in our economy, in our public services, but it is the right thing to do.
It could get down to thousands, could it? Could it a net figure of thousands?
Well, I think we'd have to give that careful thought. But my point is that it should be in the tens of thousands or lower.
And Donald Trump says he's done debating and won't participate in another head-to-head before the November election, despite polls showing Kamala Harris won their first face-off. On Truth Social, he spoke about his performance, but several top Republicans said Harris came out on top, with one poll showing 53% of voters agree. Over 67 million viewers turned in for that debate, but Harris insists voters deserve a rematch, calling for another round. However, the majority of registered voters believe one debate was enough. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Tatiana. So, Starmer's in the USA, and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky insists that his country need this war to end and not Vladimir Putin. And that's as Sir Keir Starmer is in the United States for a meeting with President Joe Biden about lifting restrictions on weapons that can be used in the conflict. Now, following Sir Keir Starmer on his trip to the US Capitol is our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, and she joins us now live from DC. Catherine, so Sir Keir Starmer's had a bruising week politically here in Britain with the winter fuel cap being taken rid of. His popularity ratings are at an all-time low. 46% of people have an unfavourable rating. So he's on a charm offensive in the USA, but he's walked right into a war of words with Vladimir Putin. Tell us more.
Yes, hello, Martin from Washington, D.C. Yes, difficult times at home for the new Prime Minister, just a couple of months since he swept to that huge landslide victory, but an incredibly precarious, delicate and frankly worrying international situation. He's come to Washington to meet the president, outgoing President Joe Biden. Of course, we don't know who will be in charge of the US after November the 5th. To talk about, number 10 is keen to stress pressing international issues, not just Ukraine, but also the Middle East, tensions in the Indo-Pacific, climate resilience, etc. But it is very, very clear that the situation in Ukraine is absolutely at the top of everybody's minds here. Now, the Prime Minister and David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, have been at the British Embassy this morning. They will be going to the White House a little bit later, meeting for about an hour and a half with the President. We understand that the National Security Advisor, Tim Barrow, will also be there. Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, amongst others. And this thorny issue of Storm Shadow missiles really central, although the government do not want to discuss the nitty-gritty of this at all. They're keen to say it's a wider discussion focusing on how the Ukraine war might progress through the winter and into next year. But it is clear from what Volodymyr Zelensky said to Lammy and Blinken earlier in the week in Ukraine and what he's been saying on X today, what Ukraine wants and said it needs desperately is the permission of not just the UK and France, who make these long-range Storm Shadow missiles, to send them into Russian territory itself to destroy Russian infrastructure that is then targeting Ukraine, but to get the permission of the United States to do that. Now, the United States has previously been firmly of the opinion that they don't want to go there. But of course, with the news that Iran is now supplying ballistic missiles to Russia, it is seen perhaps that Russia has already escalated this. And it does feel like the sands are shifting now. We're told not to expect an announcement today. It's possible we might get one at the United Nations General Assembly in a week or so. Equally possible that the first we might know that permission has been granted is when these missiles are indeed used inside Russia, if that happens. Now, Vladimir Putin has made it very clear that if that happens, he said it would mean that NATO countries are at war with Russia, and said that we will take corresponding decisions based on the threats that will be created to us. So quite a clear threat, though of course not the first time that Putin has made such threats. We all remember, don't we, the morning that Russia invaded Ukraine, waking up to him basically threatening anybody who, quote, interferes with what they were doing with unimaginable consequences. That hasn't happened yet, but great concerns and a very difficult situation here.
Catherine, we can see behind you there the White House, the magnificent setting, the crucible of world power. There have been a lot of criticisms of the Labour government in terms of two-tiered policing, two-tiered justice. Is there now a fresh allegation of two-tiered wars? Because after all, David Lammy's first action as the Foreign Secretary was to close off arms contracts to Israel to prevent Israel from fighting its war. And yet the day after axing the winter fuel allowance, £1.4 billion saved there, giving an extra $600 million to Ukraine, and now effectively giving some of our most powerful missiles to Ukraine. It clearly feels like one war is more important to the Labour Party than another.
Well, certainly these Storm Shadow missiles are ferociously expensive. They cost, I think, about £750,000 each. So war is not cheap. Yes, we've had that announcement of an additional $600 100 million for Ukraine on top of the 3 billion a year that we've said we will give to the country for as long as it is needed. And yes, sure, a lot of controversial decisions being taken by the new government, not least the decision to suspend, I think, about 10% of our arms export licenses to Israel. Worth saying, we only supply a tiny fraction of Israel's defense capabilities, but that was controversial and apparently didn't go down terribly well behind me in the White House, though they've been keen to sort of paper over differences there. And as you say, yes, choices have been made, because on the one hand, this money is being found for these international conflicts, but on the other hand, we're being told there's a £22 billion black hole, and that, you know, pensioners are losing their winter fuel allowance. Yesterday, on the plane with the Prime Minister on the way over, I asked him if they were giving some sort of punishment beating to pensioners who, of course, by and large, tend not to vote Labour. A lot of them voted Brexit. The Prime Minister said no, absolutely not, stressing that these are difficult decisions. But, you know, a lot of pensioners very worried about how to pay the bills this winter. And again, I asked him about, could he rule out scrapping the single occupancy council tax discount, worth a lot of money to many people that live on their own, not just pensioners. He wouldn't do that. He says we have to wait for the budget, 30th of October.
Yeah. There are going to be some nasty surprises in that the day before Halloween. Superb pictures, by the way, of you, Catherine Forster, travelling over with the Prime Minister and asking the punchy questions. Well done to you, and we'll catch up with you later in the show, live from DC. Now, let's continue this conversation there. We can see Catherine Forster, look, with the Prime Minister, even laughing at his jokes. Well done. Now, joining me now is the defence analyst, Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford. Welcome to the show, Stuart. Always a pleasure. I want to talk to you specifically about Putin's threats of NATO waging war, and specifically the United Kingdom's involvement in that. It's been an open secret, of course. We've been supplying billions of pounds of aid and armaments to Ukraine since the very beginning. But why is it now, specifically in your mind, that Vladimir Putin is intimating some kind of red line has been crossed?
Good afternoon, Martin, and always a pleasure to join you. And I just have to say in passing that I think your correspondent in Washington, Catherine Foster, I think it is, has got a complete handle on all these topics, and I can only really sort of agree with everything that she said. As for why Putin should react now to the developments which may or may not happen in Washington, D.C. today, because we don't have any confirmation of that, I think he's finally beginning to realise that his bluff has been called. And the catalyst for this would appear to be not just the constant lobbying by President Zelensky of both the USA and the UK to allow him to deploy the weapons supplied to him, the long-range precision weapons supplied to him, into mainland Russia, which I and many other commentators think should have been done a long time ago. But also the fact that he's up against it, because this will up the ante, and he's bluffing. He cannot retaliate against NATO or incur war against NATO because he knows he will lose. So I think, contrary to some commentators saying that this will escalate the conflict, I think there's a possibility that allowing the Ukrainians to use the weapons supplied to them on the Russian mainland may actually bring the end of the conflict a bit closer.
So, Stuart, what the counterpoint to that would be, because these missiles are so obviously and transparently British, the Storm Shadow missiles, and because they patently are long-range missiles, therefore used within Ukraine into Russian territory, that's not the same as defending Ukraine within its own sovereign territory that's been invaded. So Putin would intimate that Britain's fingerprints are on this is British armaments, and so therefore it's an escalation, it's a change. Is that correct to say?
Well, it's definitely a change. But again, I would say that if it's acceptable to him to use ballistic missiles supplied by Iran to Russia to attack Ukraine, then it only seems fair that missiles supplied from the West should be able to be used by Ukraine to attack Russia. And I don't think that we're talking about all limitations being removed. I don't think, for example, the USA or Britain would countenance the use of Storm Shadow missiles or the like against Moscow, for example. But certainly to attack the bases from which the Russians are launching their air offensive against Ukraine would be perfectly acceptable. And for too long, Ukraine has been fighting this war with one hand tied behind its back. And it's time, I think, that we declared weapons free, with limitations, as I mentioned, to allow them to retaliate appropriately.
Of course, we're always talking about World War III is only a heartbeat away, and that's the worry, of course, when you're going head to head with another nuclear power such as Russia and Vladimir Putin. But in your mind, is that just the ultimate bluster? Is this really the signs of a President Putin on the retreat, and this is all hot air, or could we yet see more potential danger?
Well, I think it would be foolhardy to completely dismiss the threats of escalation. I don't believe that nuclear weaponry will become involved. And I don't believe that Russia and Vladimir Putin will seek in any way direct confrontation with NATO, because as I've said many times before, and I'm sure I've said it on this programme, your programme, Martin, many times before, if that were to happen and direct confrontation between Russia and NATO were to result, then there's only going to be one ending to that, and it's not good for Russia and Putin, because NATO countries are infinitely more powerful, both militarily and economically, than is Russia. So I think that we have to accept that he's actually bluffing, he's rattled, but we can't completely dismiss it, because who knows what someone under great duress might do. But I can't see this escalating into World War III, because I think that within Russia itself, and I don't know this, but within Russia itself, I suspect there are those who, if, for example, Putin reached for the nuclear button, would make sure that that never happened.
OK, Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford, thank you very much, as ever, for your expertise. And really, let's hope we don't have World War III, especially on a Friday afternoon. Thank you very much. Now, lots more on that story, of course, throughout the show. And there's plenty of coverage on our website, gbnews.com, and you've helped to make it the fastest-growing national news website in the country. So thank you very much. Now, brace yourselves, because it's time for the Great British Giveaway now, and the biggest cash prize we've ever given away here at GB News. £36,000 could be yours. That's like having an extra £3,000 tax-free in your bank account each and every month for an entire year. Now, here's all the details that you need to try and make it yours.
Designating on demand. Good luck.
Well, there's loads more meat coming up on today's show, including junk food TV ads are to be banned before the 9 p.m. watershed following their outdoor smoking ban. Is this a sensible nudge towards a healthier nation, or is it Starmer's nanny state on steroids? That and much more after this.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
But let's get stuck in. Prince Harry, he's consulted former aides about a possible partial return to the UK as he seeks to repair his public image. That is according to the Daily Mail.
Who wants him? I'm sorry. This is, of course, he's got his book Spare.
Yeah.
The paperback comes out later this year. Now, he's not updating it, but he'll want to promote it.
Yeah, absolutely.
He says he's not doing any interviews, but we're talking about him now, we're talking about Spare.
Yeah.
And is he going to come back with his wife? What about the children? Because apparently it's not safe for his wife and children in this country, according to Harry, even though he took his wife to Colombia, which is much less safe than Britain, in my view.
It's absurd. Anyway, he was able to attend his uncle's funeral quite easily.
He did.
Nobody knew he was coming. He said he wasn't, and then he did. And he was perfectly safe.
And he would have had the same security as every other member of the royal family who attended that event.
Yeah.
But of course, he didn't speak to his brother at the funeral.
No, he wouldn't, would he?
So if he's trying to fix it, honestly, a funeral is where you should put all differences aside, because it's not about you. It's about respect to the person, the family of the person who's gone, which was his uncle. It was his Diana's sister's husband had died. So yet they didn't speak. They didn't speak in the church. They didn't speak when they left the church. Incredible, isn't it?
It's awful, because that moment is when you realise that we are all mortal, and at that point you should all other things should transcend that. But not.
Well, this move is being branded as Operation Bring Harry In from the Cold, because apparently he's a bit fed up with his life in Montecito. Does that mean with his wife?
I don't know.
Oh no! Apparently he's dissatisfied with advice from his American-based image expert.
Well, they've had about 10 of them, haven't they? They're on to their number 11.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. It's 3:25. I'm Martin Daubney on GB with you on this Friday afternoon. Now, the government has launched a war on obesity, banning pre-watershed TV adverts for junk food. Online ads are also being targeted with a further ban on promoting products that are high in fat, salt and sugar. Now, is this the right move to help a country shed some weight, or has the nanny state simply gone mad? Well, I pose that question now to Chris Snowdon, Head of Lifestyle Economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs, and a gentleman who's always been consistently sharp on this topic all the way along. Chris, the government promised to tread more lightly on our lives before they got elected into power. It seems they were telling whoppers, first smoking and now junk food ads. Are they simply interfering and going too far?
Yes, yes, they are. And the outdoor smoking ban in particular really came as a shock. This is less of a shock because it's not actually their policy. It's been bequeathed to them by Rishi Sunak, and it was originally actually Boris Johnson who announced it. It's been kicked back a few times. It's been postponed because of concerns about the cost of living and the economic damage that this ban could do. But actually, Rishi Sunak said he was going to bring it in October 2025. There was never any doubt that Keir Starmer was going to stick to that timetable because he's even more of a fan of the nanny state, I think, than Rishi was.
Now, we hear all the time about economic black holes. It's almost becoming this government's Brexit means Brexit, the £22 billion black hole. But this time, Chris, we're being threatened with an even bigger black hole, a super black hole of 100 billion quid. And that's a projected cost to the NHS if we don't do all of this stuff. So they're basically saying, unless we start banning fags outside football grounds, unless we get rid of fast food ads, then the bill is going to be massive. So therefore, they're going for the preventative measure, which basically means telling us how to live our lives. The question I've got for you is, Chris, is there any evidence anywhere in the world that these kind of interventions work?
Not that I've ever seen, no. In fact, very, very few countries have tried restricting food advertising. I am struggling to think of any countries. I'm pretty sure there are none in Europe, certainly, that have any kind of food advertising ban like this. I think the UK is, I suppose, Starmer would say, leading the world. I would say, dragging the UK's reputation down. So we're in uncharted territory with this. The government's impact assessment says this particular policy, the ban on so-called junk food online and on television before 9 p.m, will reduce the average child's energy consumption by 2.3 calories per day. This is, beyond negligible. It's just not going to have any effect. And believe me, that figure of 2.3 calories a day is almost certainly a huge overestimate. If you look at the modelling upon which it is based. So, look, I don't think this is going to make any difference. There was a ban in 2007 on the same food products being advertised during programmes that children predominantly watched. That didn't have any effect on child obesity. The only real effect it had was closing down children's ITV. So the losers here are going to be the broadcasters and the online platforms. The winners presumably would be radio stations, billboards, other advertising medium, but it's not going to make any difference to child obesity or the NHS at all.
And Chris Snowden's Sadiq Khan tried a similar thing, didn't he? On the underground, he banned high-fat foods on the underground. Trust me, I get the tube every night. There's no evidence whatsoever that anybody in London has lost any weight anytime soon as a consequence of any of that kind of advertising ban. And I put this to you as well, Chris. The real losers here are the working classes, because if there's any kind of extra tax placed on things like sugar and salt and fat, the rich won't care. They'll just keep buying stuff, but it will disproportionately impact those at the bottom, if you like, of the earnings chain. And so are these kind of taxes punishing of the working classes if they come in that way?
Well, of course it will be. Taxes like this are always really regressive, and it's been notable that a lot of the campaigners like Jamie Oliver have been straight out of the blocks this week. They can scent blood. They can see that Keir Starmer and Wes Streeting are people they can do business with, because I think they genuinely believe this nonsense, the economic argument about, preventive medicine of this kind, saving the NHS money. And it won't do for two reasons. Firstly, if it works, so you would just end up with even more old people in NHS hospitals, and it's people who are, over the age of 70 who use the NHS the most. And secondly, because they won't work anyway. The sugar tax didn't have any effects on obesity. Minimum pricing has been a disaster. In Scotland, the TfL ban you mentioned in London made no difference to anything. Most of this stuff is incredibly ineffective, and you would hope that when people look back on the actual outcomes from policies like the sugar tax, and you see that it's sucked £250 million out of people's pockets every year and not done anything about tooth decay or childhood obesity as it was supposed to, there'd be some apologies, maybe even some resignations from the people who demanded these ineffective policies. In actual fact, it's the opposite. They double down. They either claim that actually, despite all the evidence, they have worked, or they say that they would work if we just did it a bit more. The medicine isn't working, more medicine.
Superb stuff. As I say, you've been brilliant on this all the way, especially during lockdowns. Chris Snowden, Head of Lifestyle Economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much, my friend. Now, still lots more to come between now and 4 o'clock, including 7 Rotherham child abusers have been jailed for over 100 years after harrowing crimes against girls. We'll be live with our national reporter, Charlie Peters, outside Sheffield Crown Court after your latest news headlines with Tatiana.
Martin, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories first to news from Sunderland, where a man has become the first person convicted for rioting in the city during the recent UK-wide unrest. Kieran Asher admitted to charges at Newcastle Crown Court after CCTV footage captured him leading violence during the Sunderland riots on the 2nd of August. Footage showed the 32-year-old masked, throwing missiles at police and inciting others to join in. The violence caused significant damage to local businesses and forced police to briefly retreat. And as you've been hearing, 7 men who committed a string of child sex abuse offences against 2 teenage girls in Rotherham have been jailed for a total of 106 years. The men were all convicted after a 9-week trial, which was the result of an investigation by the National Crime Agency called Operation Stovewood. The victims, who were aged between 11 and 16, at the time of the offences and were both in care, were groomed and often plied with alcohol or cannabis before being raped or assaulted. In other news, the presenter Jay Blades, best known for his role on the BBC's The Repair Shop, has been charged with controlling and coercive behaviour against his estranged wife. Court documents have revealed his charges include physical and emotional abuse. He was reported to have split from his wife in May after 18 months of marriage. The 54-year-old appeared in court this morning, and he'll appear in court again on the 11th of October. Russia's claims against 6 British diplomats of espionage and sabotage are completely baseless, according to the Foreign Office. The FSB security service claims the diplomats' actions prompted the response amid what it called numerous unfriendly steps by the UK. It comes as the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, meets the US President Joe Biden in Washington to discuss Ukraine's request to use Western weapons on Russian soil. Concerns over escalation have delayed approval for Ukraine's use of the ballistic missiles. The prison population in England and Wales has dropped by over 2,000 in just 1 week following the start of the government's early release scheme. Today's figures are the first to be published since Labour's plan took effect, reducing the number of prisoners to just over 86,000, down from a record 88,000. Under the scheme implemented this week, about 1,700 inmates were freed who'd served 40% of their sentences. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, if you want to get in touch with me at GB News, you know what to do. Simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay. And I'll read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome along to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. It's turned into a fine day for many of us. Dry, sunny spells. There is some rain turning up later, and that's because of this weather front coming along from the Atlantic, and it's going to push cloud and outbreaks of rain and a freshening breeze into the west of Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland. But for the vast majority, sunny spells through the rest of the afternoon into the early evening, and then any cloud that does appear through the day tends to fizzle out overnight for England and Wales. As a result, temperatures falling away. Once again, we've got relatively cold air in place, 1 or 2 mist and fog patches. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, the thicker cloud here, outbreaks of rain, mean that it won't be quite as chilly, 10 to 12 Celsius. Meanwhile, temperatures could be close to freezing in some parts of central and southern England and South Wales. But that's where we've got the best of the sunshine first thing. A beautiful start to the day. Yeah, there'll be some high cloud around, but for much of England and Wales, what a cracking start to the weekend. Now, Cumbria, a bit more cloud, and certainly for Scotland and Northern Ireland, it is a cloudier start to the day. That means it's not going to be quite as chilly out there. Temperatures typically in the double figures, but it's fairly dreary over the Highlands, the Grampians, the southern uplands, a lot of low cloud, some patchy rain and drizzle. Brighter skies for the east of Scotland and certainly for much of England and Wales. We keep the dry and bright weather through the day, some areas of medium and high cloud around, but otherwise it's set fair. Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, increasingly breezy, increasingly damp, and as a result it's not going to feel very pleasant as the winds pick up. But further south, a slightly warmer day compared with Friday, highs of 18 to 19 Celsius. And we keep the fine weather in the south into Saturday night, but the weather front that's causing the damp weather in the northwest tends to sink south into northern England and parts of Wales by Sunday. To the north of that, some showers, and to the south, staying fine. Higher pressure next week.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, hello to you, I'm Jules Buckley. West Yorkshire eastbound M62 around Brickhouse Junction 25. A vehicle currently undergoing a tyre change, so a lane's been closed off, is causing queues. 5 miles worth of queues for the M6 either side of 18 Middlewich and Sandbach 17. It follows earlier emergency repairs. All lanes back open. There is a speed limit in place though of 60 miles per hour. A lane shut for the northbound M5 from the M50 up to Worcester, 8 to 7. A collision there is causing queues. Clockwise M25 struggling around St Albans, junction 21A to 22. A lane shut for a bump at the tailback, back to the M1 at 21. And in Stamford in Rutland, the southbound A1 closed from the Tick&Co turnoff down towards Stamford. There's big queues building at the scene there of a police incident. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:38. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. 7 Rotherham child abusers have been jailed for over 100 years after harrowing crimes against girls. And today's sentencing is the result of a 5-year investigation by the National Crime Agency as part of Operation Stovewood. To get the latest on this harrowing case, our national reporter Charlie Peters is live for us at Sheffield Crown Court. Charlie, welcome to the show. Yesterday when we spoke, you read out some astonishing impact statements from the victims. The day ahead of sentencing, I have to confess, it completely moved me to tears. Today, these girls finally got justice. Tell us more.
Yes, Martin, and today was no less emotional. Both victims in the court today sat in the jury area underneath the public gallery, so the friends and family of the abusers couldn't see them, but they could see the defendants as they were handed down a total of 106 years in jail by Mr. Justice Slater here at Sheffield Crown Court. And since the sentencing ended, I've managed to speak to one of the survivors quickly, who told me it's an amazing outcome. They're extremely happy with the justice that's been led down here today. And I've also spoken to the senior investigating officer from the National Crime Agency on this case, who said that he wanted to pay tribute to the fortitude and bravery of the victims of those child sexual offences for coming forward. He said that the abusers were cruel and manipulative, but now they face significant custodial sentences. So the 7 men sentenced today are Mohammed Amar. He was sent to 14 years imprisonment, 2 years on extended licence. Yasser Ajaib, 6 years imprisonment. Mohammed Zamir Sadiq, 15 years imprisonment. An exasperated reaction when that figure was read out by His Honour Judge Michael Slater. And then also Mohammed Zamir Mohammed Siab, he was given 25 years of imprisonment, a lengthy sentence, again with a strong reaction from the public gallery, lots of people visibly wiping away tears. He was receiving that sentence via an Urdu interpreter in the dock. He stood up and waved to his family as he was led away by the custodial staff. And one of his family members shouted down, "I love you, Dad," as he was led away. He was described as a persistent and cruel sexual offender by the judge. He was 27 at the time of the offending. His victim was just 11 years old. Abid Sadiq, he was sentenced to 24 years, another lengthy sentence. He was described by the judge as a cunning and determined sexual predator, despite his learning difficulties. He committed his crimes while already under investigation for separate crimes, and he said, the judge said that you knew what you were up to and you continued doing it. After a break, we also heard 2 more sentences being delivered. Tahir Yassin was given 13 years imprisonment and Ramin Bari 9 years in prison. So in total, 106 years for those 7 defendants who were found guilty after a 9-week trial, which concluded earlier this summer. And that followed a 5-year-long investigation by the National Crime Agency, who've launched several investigations under Operation Stovewood. That was launched in 2014 to assess the historic non-familial child abuse that had taken place in Rotherham at the height of that South Yorkshire town's child abuse, trafficking and grooming scandal, where from 1997 to 2014, some 1,400 girls were abused. That's what the Alexis J report found in 2014. Operation Stovewood has identified some 1,150 of those victims. It's made over 250 arrests. These convictions now bring it up to 38. There are hundreds of years of jail time that it's achieved. But Martin, you might be hearing 38 convictions and just think that's nowhere near enough. And that is a consistent perspective with all of those involved in tackling child sexual exploitation in Rotherham right throughout this scandal. This case was particularly harrowing and dehumanising. Those were the terms used in court during the trial and repeatedly by the National Crime Agency and again at the sentencing. The girls, aged 11 and 15 when the abuse started in the 2000s, were trafficked around hotels, car parks, cemeteries, in one case being abused behind a nursery. One of the girls spoke about how she was groomed, aged 11, at her primary school playground, and she was forced to commit sexual acts later that same day. Yesterday, when she gave her victim impact statement, powerfully in person, stood in the witness box next to the judge, directing her anger and her righteous fury towards those 7 defendants. She said, "You stole my childhood and you took my innocence, but now I have control." She said that 22 years ago, she was being groomed, and 10 years ago, her fight for justice started, but now she had won. She was taking away their freedom. She said, "I am your karma." The other victim impact statement was read out by a prosecuting barrister. She said that she hoped the defendants now felt as isolated, as vulnerable, and as hurt as she had both during and after the abuse. So I think those 106 years are a significant sentence, probably one of the largest sentencings that Operation Stovewood has had, certainly the largest in recent years from my research. But they did previously have a 13-strong gang that they committed to jail, but that was split across 2 different trials due to the size of it. We have had some reaction from the CPS and the National Crime Agency since those sentencings were delivered by His Honour Judge Michael Slater. Zoe Becker for the CPS said that these 7 men deliberately preyed on 2 young girls they knew were vulnerable and, using drugs and alcohol, exploited them for their own sexual gratification. She said that the cruelty and abuse the victims suffered at the hands of these defendants was horrific and has continued to have a lasting impact on them today. We also heard separately from the National Crime Agency, who again thanked the fortitude of the survivors and paid tribute to them for coming forward. That's what they need the survivors to do, to have confidence and trust in the authorities after they were let down so severely by South Yorkshire Police and the local council at the time.
Charlie Peters, it's an astonishing amount of information to try and take, and I think anybody watching this would just simply be blown away by the bravery it must take for those 2 survivors to have stood up and faced pure evil, looking them straight in the eyes. And yet, Charlie, it seems astonishing that somebody could say, I love you, to somebody being sent down for such heinous crimes. Charlie, you were there. You saw these 7 men. You looked them in the eye. Was there any sign of acceptance of the grotesque horrors they committed?
Well, they looked towards their families, often greeting them with smiles as they entered the dock. But Martin, I've been covering this story for years across the country, and one of the consistent themes I've noted while covering these child abuse gangs is that all too often, when perpetrators are given sentences, long or short, when they are released from prison, they are re-accepted back into their communities, often returning directly to their families. No enormous and visible signs of community punishment, of shame for what has happened in the past. And to see those public displays of affection from the gallery in the court saying, I love you, Dad, as a man is sent down for trafficking, rape, and for indecent assault, well, that was quite something to witness, and it points to a wider trend that I've certainly seen across the country when covering these trials and these appalling cases. And I think survivors often fear that when those who are sent to prison come out of prison, often again on short sentences, they bump into them again in the street, in the supermarket. They return to their towns. That is one of the causes of the lasting suffering that these survivors have to endure.
Charlie Peters, incredible reporting, and well done. Well done to you for just holding a mirror to this, as ugly as it can be, and telling the truth. And well done for comforting those girls afterwards. Thank you very much, Charlie Peters there. Astonishing stuff. Thank you. Now, still to come, it's the Royal Air Force, because 11-year-old Prince George has taken his first flying lesson, following in the footsteps of his great-grandfather. Prince Philip, of course, took to the skies at the same Windsor airfield way back in 1952. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Michael found the recipe for success without going to university. Instead, he went looking for answers inside of a kitchen. The 22-year-old has just finished a level 2 course in professional cookery at UCB, a college in Birmingham.
When I started UCB, I was expecting to be so intense from day one, but it's not. It sort of builds up, so to the point where you get comfortable. And building that comfort is a huge part of becoming a chef, because you need to be comfortable being in your own skin.
This week, tens of thousands of students get their A-level results. The college wants them to remember university isn't the only option after school, and West Midlands Mayor Richard Parker agrees.
university is the right route for lots of our young people, but there are other pathways to getting access to qualifications that will give young people the skills they need to succeed in life.
Further education principal Rosa Wells says apprenticeships and technical courses are also great routes to a career.
Here at University College Birmingham, we offer vocational courses. These are hands-on technical courses that can give people a different opportunity, something different to school. So we've got brilliant facilities that really give students industry standard training.
A skills shortage across the UK means youngsters learning trades are desperately needed. 36% of job vacancies are due to shortages. The Labour government's new body, Skills England, has been created to bring training providers and businesses together with local and national authorities plus unions to target trade gaps and regional requirements. Michael's now finishing his qualification. Where he goes next is down to him.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10 to 4. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, Prince George has embarked on his first flying lesson at the tender age of just 11. The future king is the latest in a long line of royal aviators, including his father, of course, Prince William, and his great-grandfather, Prince Philip. His parents, the Prince and Princess of Wales, watched as their son soared into the air from a Berkshire airfield. Let's find out more now with our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. Cameron, welcome to the show. So Prince George has lifted off. Tell us more.
Yeah, he certainly had, Martin. That flying lesson happening last Tuesday, the day before he went back to school after the summer holidays. It was first reported in the Sun newspaper this morning. However, I understand that the information in that article is, in fact, true. So they arrived, reportedly, George, Prince William and Princess Catherine in a 3-car convoy to the Waltham airfield near Maidenhead, which is in Berkshire, about a 20-minute drive from their home Adelaide Cottage on the Windsor Castle estate. Prince William and Catherine watched Prince George on as he and a flying instructor took off in an aircraft, and they were in the air for around an hour as Prince George received that first flying lesson. And on Nakatoba-san, he loved it, and it's the right time for him to start. Prince George is 11. There isn't actually any particular age limit on learning to fly, but you can't log your flying hours until you turn 14 years old, and you can't do your test till you're 16, and you can't have a private pilot's license until you're 17. But that airfield was actually where Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, Prince George's great-grandfather, learnt to fly way back in 1952. And of course, there is a long line of males within the royal family who have learnt to fly. Prince Charles, well, now King Charles, of course, but then Prince Charles learnt to fly. Prince William as well known that he was an RAF search and rescue helicopter pilot and an East Anglian air ambulance pilot as well. So it's certainly something that Prince George clearly has a passion for, or appears to have a passion for, but of course he's still very, very young indeed. Perhaps we will see him take after his father, do some work with the RAF, and of course one day he's going to be king and be head of the armed forces, which includes, of course, the Royal Air Force. But before all that, Prince George, almost 13, he will be starting to prepare for his entrance exams into big schools such as perhaps Eton College or Marlborough College, one of those big elite private schools which members of the royal family tends to go to. So he's got a lot of education ahead of him, but clearly it appears to be learning to fly as well.
Well, Cameron Walker, when I was 11, the nearest I got to that was making paper airplanes, but of course I'm a mere commoner. Now we've got a quick minute because Prince Harry is going on a lad's holiday. Would it be anything like the glory days of Las Vegas, do you think, this weekend? Of course, it's his 40th birthday.
Yeah, I was wondering whether it would be a Las Vegas 2.0, Martin. Yes, I do understand that Prince Harry even is going to be going away for a bit of a lads' weekend this weekend. He turns 40 on Sunday. It's understood that Meghan, his wife, has prepared or is organising a big birthday bash for him, surrounded by friends and family in California before he jets off abroad with some close friends. But there will, of course, be some very noticeable absences at that party. Prince William, for example, and the King, his dad, they clearly, we understand, not going to be there. He is still estranged from both of them, but Prince Harry appears to be pretty happy with his life in California. He told the BBC this morning that fatherhood has given him a new kind of fresh perspective on life, and that is his focus, fatherhood and his life in California.
Well, let's see if Prince Harry ends up at another pool party. That was when he was his most popular in 2012. Cameron Walker, always a pleasure. Thank you, my friend. Speak to you again soon. I've got plenty more coming in the next hour, including an astonishing neighbours at war story. 11 years a couple weren't allowed to look into their neighbour's house. They won the legal battle. We've got that's coming next here on GB News, including, of course, the first coal mine in 30 years has bitten the dust in Britain. Now it's time for your weather. And here's Aidan McGibbon.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome along to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. It's turned into a fine day for many of us. Dry, sunny spells. There is some rain turning up later, and that's because of this weather front coming along from the Atlantic, and it's going to push cloud and outbreaks of rain and a freshening breeze into the west of Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland. But for the vast majority, sunny spells through the rest of the afternoon into the early evening, and then any cloud that does appear through the day tends to fizzle out overnight for England and Wales. As a result, temperatures falling away once again. We've got relatively cold air in place, 1 or 2 mist and fog patches. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, the thicker cloud here, outbreaks of rain, mean that it won't be quite as chilly, 10 to 12 Celsius. Meanwhile, temperatures could be close to freezing in some parts of central and southern England and South Wales. But that's where we've got the best of the sunshine first thing. A beautiful start to the day. There'll be some high cloud around, but for much of England and Wales, what a cracking start to the weekend. Now, Cumbria, a bit more cloud, and certainly for Scotland and Northern Ireland, it is a cloudier start to the day. That means it's not going to be quite as chilly out there. Temperatures typically in the double figures, but it's fairly dreary over the Highlands, the Grampians, the southern uplands, a lot of low cloud, some patchy rain and drizzle. Brighter skies for the east of Scotland and certainly for much of England and Wales. We keep the dry and bright weather through the day, some areas of medium and high cloud around, but otherwise it's set fair. Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, increasingly breezy, increasingly damp, and as a result it's not going to feel very pleasant as the winds pick up. But further south, a slightly warmer day compared with Friday, highs of 18 to 19 Celsius. And we keep the fine weather in the south into Saturday night, but the weather front that's causing the damp weather in the northwest tends to sink south into northern England and parts of Wales by Sunday. To the north of that, some showers, and to the south, staying fine. Higher pressure next week.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good luck.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions.
That raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return.
And a few surprises along the way.
Might be cold in this studio.
That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
the latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. There's queues on the southbound A1M, Chester Street down to Carville Junction. 63 to 62 is queuing, a lane shut for an accident there. Anti-clock M60, there's one as well. 13 Worsley through towards the East Lancs Road at 14. So the anti-clockwise side's part blocked. Big queues back to Junction 17 and back towards Junction 2 of the M61 as well. Northbound side of the M6 away from the Croft interchange, that's Junction 21A. There's a breakdown blocking a lane. Delays both sides of the M6 around Middlewich 18 following earlier emergency repairs. And the westbound M27, so heading away from Wickham Junction 10 through towards Fareham at Junction 9. There's a breakdown there blocking a lane, and that's causing delays on the approaches this afternoon. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. Hope you're having a fantastic Friday afternoon. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, with its popularity ratings at an all-time low, Keir Starmer has jetted to the USA to offer British arms support to Ukraine. But Vladimir Putin has issued an ominous warning, saying that would be a declaration of war. GB News, as you can see on your screens, will be live from Washington, D.C. as the Prime Minister faces his first major international test. And next up, in a bid to plug a projected £100 billion super black hole in the NHS budget, the Labour Party is planning to ban fast food TV ads before the 9 p.m. watershed. Following their outdoor smoking ban, is this a sensible nudge towards a healthier nation, or is it Starmer's nanny state on steroids? And Donald Trump will be live at 5 p.m. here on GB News because the former president has sensationally rejected another TV debate with Kamala Harris. But at 5 p.m. today, Trump will deliver a highly anticipated press conference to tell us why he believes that his time will be better spent attacking the Democrats on immigration and the economy. And a fabulous story here. An East Sussex couple banned from looking into their neighbour's house for an incredible 11 years finally won a bitter legal battle. Their neighbours claimed they were harassing them, but the couple claimed they were merely praying. Well, they'll join me on the show to tell of their incredible tale of neighbours at war. And that's all coming in this next hour. Once the show, always a pleasure to have your company. So next thing to go is burger ads on the telly. That follows, of course, the ban on having a crafty fag outside the pub or even outside a football match. The Labour Party promised to tread lightly before the general election in our lives. Were they telling whoppers? Get in touch, usual way, you know what to do. gbnews.com/your say. But now's your headlines, and here's Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you very much and good afternoon. The top stories this hour. A man from Sunderland's become the first person to be convicted of riot in the city following the recent disorder across the UK. Kieran Usher admitted to charges at Newcastle Crown Court after CCTV captured him leading violence during the Sunderland riots on the 2nd of August. Footage showed the 32-year-old masked, throwing missiles at police and inciting others to join in. The violence caused significant damage to local businesses and forced police officers to briefly retreat. 7 men who committed a string of child sex abuse offences against 2 teenage girls in Rotherham have been jailed for a total of 106 years. The men were all convicted after a 9-week trial, which was the result of an investigation by the National Crime Agency called Operation Stovewood. The victims, who were aged between 11 and 16 at the time of the offences and were both in care, were groomed and often plied with alcohol or cannabis before being assaulted. They would often be collected by their abusers from the children's homes where they lived at the time. Over the course of the hearing, the 7 men were handed jail sentences between 7 and 25 years. BBC presenter Jay Blades has been charged with engaging in controlling or coercive behaviour towards his wife. Court documents have revealed his charges include physical and emotional abuse. The 54-year-old appeared in court this morning and he'll appear in court again on the 11th of October. Russia's claims against 6 British diplomats of espionage and sabotage are completely baseless, according to the Foreign Office. The FSB security service claims the diplomats' actions prompted the response amid what it called numerous unfriendly steps by the UK. It comes as the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, meets the US President Joe Biden in Washington to discuss Ukraine's request to use Western weapons on Russian soil. Concerns over escalation have delayed approval for Ukraine's use of the ballistic missiles. What would have been the UK's first coal mine in 30 years is now in legal limbo as planning permissions been quashed by the High Court. Climate campaigners argue the decision to grant planning permission for the Whitehaven coal mine in Cumbria smacked of hypocrisy and contradicted the UK's climate commitments. The government had withdrawn its defence, but developer West Cumbria Mining still contested the claim. However, in today's ruling, the judge said giving the go-ahead for the development was legally flawed. The prison population in England and Wales has dropped by over 2,000 in just 1 week following the start of the government's early release scheme. Today's figures are the first to be published since Labour's plan took effect, reducing the number of prisoners to just over 86,000, down from 88,500. Under the scheme implemented this week, about 1,700 inmates were freed who'd served 40% of their sentences. On the 22nd of October, it'll be the turn of those with sentences of 5 years or more. But the government insists it won't apply to most serious offenders like killers, rapists and terrorists. Robert Jenrick's proposing to drastically limit the number of migrants entering the country. The leading candidate for the Conservative Party leadership told GB News' political editor Christopher Hope that he wants to see a cap of just a few thousand people per year if the Conservatives win the next election. He discussed what he called a more controlled and restrictive approach to immigration.
Accept that what I'm arguing for will not be plain sailing. It requires a big change in our economy, in our public services, but it is the right thing to do.
It could get down to thousands, could it? Could it a net figure of thousands?
Well, I think we'd have to give that careful thought. But my point is that it should be in the tens of thousands or lower.
In other news, 2 men have been charged after a Banksy painting was stolen from a London gallery. Larry Fraser and James Love were arrested and charged with burglary following the theft. The girl with balloon painting, which partially self-destructed during a £1.1 million auction, was recovered and will be returned to the gallery. Banksy's artwork has recently faced a string of threats, with several pieces moved for safekeeping. The 47-year-old and 53-year-old will both appear in court next month. And former US President Donald Trump says he's done debating and won't participate in another head-to-head before the November election, despite polls showing Kamala Harris won their first face-off. While Trump is due to give a press conference in an hour's time, several top Republicans said Harris came out on top, with one poll showing 53% of voters agree. Over 67 million viewers tuned in for that debate, but Harris insists voters deserve a rematch, calling for another round. However, the majority of registered voters believe one debate was enough. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, Sir Keir Starmer has embarked on a charm offensive across the pond as he gears up to meet with President Joe Biden. Now, the talks will focus on international security as President Vladimir Putin threatens NATO with war over long-range missiles being supplied to Ukraine. And Moscow has also expelled 6 British diplomats as the row intensifies. Well, following Sir Keir Starmer on his trip to the USA capital is our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, and she joins us now live from Washington, D.C. Catherine, there you are once again with the White House behind you, the crucible of power. Sir Keir Starmer leaving behind record low unfavourability polls out today. 46% of Brits have an unfavourable take on him. A huge furore over slashing the gas, the winter fuel allowance bill for pensioners, and now he's walking into an international storm. The charm offensive to give Storm Shadow missiles to Ukraine has ended up walking into a war of words with Vladimir Putin, the first big international test of Sir Keir Starmer's premiership. Tell us more.
Yes, indeed he has, Martin, and often Prime Ministers having a tough time at home, as Sir Keir Starmer undoubtedly, pardon the motorbikes, I hope you can still hear me, very noisy down here, as Sir Keir Starmer undoubtedly is doing, having a lot of bad press domestically, upsetting a lot of people, often go on these foreign trips and comparatively it's all rather easy. That cannot be said this time. He's back in Washington again. It's his second trip. He was here just a week after that landslide election back in July for the NATO summit. But this time he's here specifically for a 90-minute meeting with the outgoing US President Joe Biden. David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, is in attendance. Tim Barrow, the UK's National Security Advisor, among others. Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, who of course went with our Foreign Secretary to Ukraine earlier this week, where Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian leader, made it very, very plain what Ukraine wants from the West. Now, what Ukraine wants, what Britain and France are prepared to let it do, is to send their Storm Shadow long-range cruise missiles directly into Russian territory. Now, up until now, that's been a point that the US have said, no, that's not going to happen. We need their approval as our biggest ally, also because we will need to depend on some of their software, some of their radar systems for this to be effective. Now, it sounds like the position is changing in the White House, not least because last week we've learnt that Iran is supplying ballistic missiles to Russia. So that in itself is an escalation. Of course, the US very worried about what any escalation may mean. And Vladimir Putin has spelt it out yesterday. He said very clearly that if we supply these missiles, it would mean that NATO countries are at war with Russia, and that they would then take corresponding decisions based on the threats that would be created for them. So a very, very clear threat. Of course, we've had threats before, most notably the day that Russia went into Ukraine. Putin basically said that if anybody interfered, they would have consequences beyond their imagining. The point is he bluffing? Obviously, these weapons going into Russia, able to take out some of the infrastructure, some of the military hardware that's being used to attack Ukraine, would be massively helpful to Ukraine, but it does come with big risks. Now, Number 10 are very keen to say the meeting happening here today is not only about Ukraine, it's also about the Middle East, about the Indochina, tensions in the Indo-Pacific, climate resilience, etc., etc. But make no mistake, behind the scenes, Ukraine really is the big topic. And of course, come November the 5th, there will be either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris will become president, and things may change substantially again at that point.
Catherine Forster, you travelled to DC on the same flight as Sir Keir Starmer. We've got a photograph of you here, very sportingly laughing at his jokes even. And on that flight, Catherine, you were holding him to account on behalf of British pensioners, were you not? Tell us about the questions you asked of the Prime Minister.
Yeah, I think the picture of everybody laughing might have been we were talking about his cat, his new arrival, and I think there might also have been a comment about Donald Trump's comments about people eating cats and dogs the other day. I think that's what caused that the laughter in that photo. But yes, I did ask him on behalf of GB News viewers and pensioners in particular, basically if the government are administering some sort of punishment beating to pensioners, because of course 10 million of them are set to lose this winter fuel allowance, and they tend not to vote Labour in the same sort of numbers as younger voters do, and a lot of them also voted for Brexit. Now, he said, no, absolutely not. But I also asked him if he could reassure pensioners who are now also worrying about whether potentially they might lose their single occupancy council tax discount. If you live on your own, you get a quarter off your council tax. Many pensioners, have been widowed, lost their wife or husband, are on their own. In many cases, that loss, if it happens, could be considerably more than the winter fuel allowance that most of them are losing. Now, he wouldn't be drawn on that at all. He simply said, look, there's a budget on October the 30th. I'm not going to preempt that. He's not ruling anything in or out. That is standard procedure, I would say. But of course, we know that there are very tough decisions coming. There are tax rises, there are spending cuts coming, and many pensioners will be wondering if the government is going to target them again.
Well, Catherine Forster, well done for holding the Prime Minister to account on behalf of GB News viewers. A star-spangled performance there from you outside the White House. Thank you very much. Speak to you again later in the show. Now, moving on, low-skilled immigrants are costing the UK taxpayer over £150,000 each, and that's according to new analysis from the Office for Budget Responsibility. The eye-opening report has intensified the debate over immigration policy as the government faces rising pressure to reduce the number of low-paid migrant workers. And joining me now in the studio to discuss this is Alp Mehmet, the spectacular chairman of the Migration Watch UK. Alp, always a delight to have you in. It must be, in one sense, quite nice for a report to come out proving what you've been saying for the thick end of 20 years, that low-skilled immigration to this country comes at a deficit to the Treasury, not a benefit. Tell us more about the figures.
Well, I mean, they're stating the obvious. Interestingly enough, only a few years ago, they were saying that lower immigration would lead to a gigantic hole in our finances. Maybe that's where the Prime Minister got the idea of a black hole from. No, look, what happens regularly and has been happening for some years now is report after report showing that low-level, low-skill immigration is a net cost to the Exchequer. In 2016, there was a report which said that in the 15 years from 1995 to 2011, the net cost was minus £115 billion.
Thanks, Tony Blair.
Yeah, that had a lot to do with it. Of course it did. In fact, when we looked at the figures using the same methodology, we arrived at an even bigger figure of 140 billion. More recently, there was Oxford Economics came out with a report which showed that in 2016-17, it was a net cost of something like 4.5 billion. So it's not new, but I am pleased that the OBR finally has seen the light and has listened to what Migration Watch has been saying.
And Alp, these figures actually are the tip of the iceberg when you delve even deeper. So they work this out as the cost if you arrive as a 25-year-old low-skilled immigrant. By the time you're 66, you're not paying enough in to start clawing the pension back. So you cost 151,000, but of course the longer you live, the greater the drain on the British economy. So Absolutely. The figures actually increase to eye-watering numbers, Alp, if people live longer. Tell us about those figures.
Well, if they live to 80, and God willing, we immigrants do live to that age, that rises to something like £500 million. If they make it to 100, it's £1 million.
That's right. So just to clarify that, it's £500,000 if they live until 80, and £1 million each. This is for every single low-skilled immigrant. If they arrive at the age of 25, £1 million each if they live to 100. That's the net deficit, of course, on healthcare, education, everything in their lifetimes. So this obliterates any argument that low-skilled immigration is a positive thing for the British economy.
No, absolutely. It's not a positive. Look, according to the OBR, those who come here to work are on average half the average wage in the UK. The average wage is around 35,000 a year. In London, it's something like 44,000 a year. So they're only paying in half that, and they're only receiving half that, and they're paying in accordance with the amount that they're receiving, which is a pittance compared to the benefits, the cost to the NHS, to schools. I mean, all these things have to be factored in if you're going to establish how much it is. You can't just leave it to how much they pay in tax. There's a great deal more than that when you're working out how much in each individual, you and I, cost the state.
And that's what these eye-watering figures prove. Now, what's the way out of this? Because we need immigration, skilled immigration, high earners. You know, the Americans, Swiss, Maltese, Cypriots typically earn very, very good money per capita compared to the average taxpayer. Immigration is good if it's channeled in the correct way, not when it's unskilled or low-skilled like this. What's the solution to this?
Martin, we've been saying that for so many years. We need to focus our attention on high skill, the sort of people that are needed in this country, not because we are handing out like a charity to people who want a better life. We've got to keep immigration down. The only way that's going to happen if we have a cap. If we have a cap that we can aim for, then we can work out the policies that are going to reduce immigration, I would say, to considerably less than 100,000 net per year. At the moment, we're something like 600,000 over that. That's going to lead to a population increase within, by the mid-40s, of something like 20 million people. 20. That's 18 Birminghams, for goodness sake.
It's astonishing. Now, quickly, if we could, Robert Jenrick is the latest of the Tory hopefuls, saying that he will impose an immigration cap. But we've heard that from David Cameron from 2010, 10,000s. We've heard about caps. Will the cap fit? Can the cap ever work? Or do you think, basically, at the moment, immigration on this level seems to be baked into the way we live in Britain?
No, it can work. Of course it can work. And the figures that were released yesterday showed that they can. When you target the sort of people that we really don't want to come here, if you say no visas for dependents of low-level students, postgraduate students, then they don't come. Well, that is what you've got to do across the board. The sort of people that we don't need, we should say, sorry, but you can't come in. And we can also do something about the illegal migration, which is we're going to get between, I don't know, 30, 40,000 people coming in by the end of the year. That's a significant number.
And what we need to do, of course, is try and wean the Deliveroo economy off of this unskilled, cheap labour, because that, at the same time, suppresses wages for the British working class. We've been saying this since before Brexit, way before.
Absolutely. In our efforts, or the government's efforts to be nice, kind to migrants, in their effort to do that, they're actually smacking in the face the ordinary people at the lower end of earnings. They're hitting them, kicking them where it hurts most.
Well, Out Mehmet, thank you very much. And the OBR report here, as I said at the start, simply confirming what you've been saying in common sense terms for many years. Out Mehmet, Chairman of Migration Watch UK, thank you very much for joining me in the studio on this fine Friday afternoon. Thank you. Now, lots more on that story at 5 o'clock, and there's plenty of coverage on our website, gbnews.com, and you've helped make it the fastest-growing national news website in the country, so thank you very much. Now, brace yourselves, it's time now for the Great British Giveaway and the biggest cash prize we've ever given away here on GB News. £36,000 could be yours, and that's like having an extra £3,000 tax-free in your bank account each and every month for an entire year. Now, here's the details that you need to make it yours.
You could be the...
Very best of luck. Now, coming up, a couple who were banned from looking at their neighbour's home are celebrating after harassment charges against them were dropped following a staggering 11-year war with their neighbours. I'll talk to them next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
More than half of people aged 50 and over feel happier from having a friendship, and 46% feel a sense of belonging too. Tomorrow is the start of Friendship Month. The Oddfellows, a non-profit friendly society that provides older adults with opportunities to create new friendships, is now inviting more people this September to join their local groups and expand their friendship circles through giving a taster activity at local community centres. We're joined now by Jane Nelson, who's the CEO of Oddfellows. Good morning, Jane. Thanks for joining us. As someone in my mid-30s, I've even noticed as well that my own friendship group has diminished over the years as kind of, you know, people get married and have kids and they kind of drift apart and don't make time for each other.
How important is it to have friends separate to your family? What benefit does that bring you?
As you do get older, you do lose friends for a variety of reasons. Either you lose touch or they have an illness or they pass away as you get older. The stats show that people love spending time with their friends. It always takes somebody, doesn't it? Somebody's got to make that first step to send a text to say, do you fancy meeting up for coffee or do you fancy going to the pub or whatever the arrangement's going to be. But sometimes somebody always has to make that first step and text or phone. And I think the other key thing is it usually tends to be the same person, but that doesn't matter as long as that connectivity is made, because that's what you need. You need the connectivity. If you think about when we were children, we'd go around the playground and say, will you be my friend? Well, we don't tend to do that as we get older. But be brave, look on Oddfellows website, see all the amazing events we've got on, go to see what's going on in your area, oddfellows.co.uk, or you can telephone 0800 028 1810, and our team will be more than happy to point them in the right direction of their local events, and there's so much going on, 300 going on.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:27 on this Friday afternoon. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, a couple who were banned from looking at their neighbour's home are celebrating after harassment charges against them were dropped following an astonishing 11-year war with their neighbours. Nigel and Sheila Jacqueline from Bexhill on Sea, East Sussex, appeared at Brighton Magistrates Court on Tuesday, where they were told they were free to go after the prosecution failed to offer evidence against them. It's an astonishing story of neighbours at war, and don't we love them? Joining me now is Nigel Jacqueline, one half of the victorious couple embroiled in that neighbourly spat. Nigel, welcome to the show. What on earth kicked off an argument with neighbours that led to an 11-year fallout where you weren't even allowed to look at their property?
Yeah, so we found out that the ban actually had no legal effect, but what started it was the beach is just there, 30 yards away. There's a workshop, or there was a workshop between our house and the beach, and these people bought it and managed to get permission to turn it into a weekend home. And one Saturday afternoon, about 3 o'clock, the builders had been making a lot of noise on the roof. So we asked them to stop, and he threatened me, because you're not supposed to make noise after 1 o'clock on a Saturday. And the police said, talk to the owners. And when I approached them, he put his hand up saying, put it in writing. And she started to call the police. So it was slightly abnormal from the beginning.
So you didn't get on from the very first meeting, and then how did you get to the point where a court order was issued that you weren't allowed to look? What were you doing? It says here that your wife was chanting, staring and sticking their fingers up at the neighbours. What's your version of events?
So we go to the beach. Sometimes I stand and sometimes I face our house or look at my wife, and they thought that we were staring at them. My wife is of Indian origin and does her Hindu prayers, so she will do a mudra with hand gestures, and they have interpreted that as being, excuse me, the indigenous gesture of contempt, as it were.
Yep.
And that clearly it's not. But the pivotal moment was the involvement of an off-duty police officer who threatened my wife, and when she reported him, he reported her, and for some reason back in 2018 the police believed the policeman.
So, Nigel, this is one of those classic cases where you got off on a bad footing and certain viewpoints were taken that weren't conducive to the truth. I mean, praying, looking like giving the finger, looking at your wife, looking like you were looking towards them. Anyhow, it got to the court and you won. So tell us about how you felt when you were granted victory, and have you seen or said hello to your neighbours ever since?
So I did drive past them going out to buy the newspaper yesterday, and they did look rather anguished. They have never exchanged a civil word with us, so I don't hold out much hope for that. It's relief because, in essence, we haven't won anything. We have stopped our right to just go to the beach being taken away from us, but we'll still be. They had 400 CCTV clips of us, and this is the 12th time. This is the 12th investigation in just over 6 years, and no action has been taken against us. We actually took Sussex Police to the High Court and found out that the warning letters, these community protection warning letters, have no legal standing back in 2018. And in 2019, my wife was charged with harassment by Hindu prayers, and Pandit Satish Sharma, who's one of the highest authorities in Hinduism in the UK, appeared as an expert witness testifying that she was doing her prayers, and he agreed to do the same this year. It's just completely ridiculous.
So, Nigel, you got something there of a holy endorsement, but may I ask, have you spent an unholy sum of money on this? An 11-year legal battle can't be cheap.
We could do with that £36,000. Can you put a word in for us?
Is that what you spent? 36 grand on this nonsense?
I'm not going to quote a figure, but it is definitely in five figures. And we also did a police complaint, which got a very derisory response. And really, there are all sorts of problems that still remain, but we just need to make sure that Sussex Police either act on our complaints or certainly don't come after us again. It feels there's something going wrong in that department.
Nigel, looking from an outsider, the Independent People's Republic of Brighton, that area is renowned for its wokeness. How on earth were they clamping down on a Hindu woman who was simply praying on a beach?
Yeah, well, we're in Rotherham, which is further to the east. It did stop. I don't know if you're aware, we also ran the No to North Eye campaign opposing the asylum seeker accommodation centre. We were, for some reason, asked about that in our police interview, and the policeman did say something rather interesting at the end. So who knows? But I was elected to be a Bexhill Town councillor in order to oppose the asylum seeker accommodation centre. And if Scampton's anything to go by, hopefully we won't get one here.
OK, well, it seems you're fighting on many fronts. An astonishing 11-year conundrum there with your neighbours over simply praying. But you had a victory in court this week. Nigel, Jacqueline, thank you very much for joining us, and make sure you give our regards to your Mrs. Sheila. And hopefully she can continue praying in peace on the beach. What could possibly be wrong with that? Now, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon on GB News. Cheers, mate. And lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including 7 Rotherham child abusers have been jailed for over 100 years after harrowing crimes against girls. We'll be live with our national reporter Charlie Peters outside Sheffield Crown Court. He's been doing some astonishing reporting on this harrowing yet vital case. And that's all to come after this.
Hello, welcome along to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. It's turned into a fine day for many of us. Dry, sunny spells. There is some rain turning up later, and that's because of this weather front coming along from the Atlantic, and it's going to push cloud and outbreaks of rain and a freshening breeze into the west of Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland. But for the vast majority, sunny spells through the rest of the afternoon into the early evening, and then any cloud that does appear through the day tends to fizzle out overnight for England and Wales. As a result, temperatures falling away. Once again, we've got relatively cold air in place, 1 or 2 mist and fog patches. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, the thicker cloud here, outbreaks of rain, mean that it won't be quite as chilly, 10 to 12 Celsius. Meanwhile, temperatures could be close to freezing in some parts of central and southern England and South Wales. But that's where we've got the best of the sunshine first thing. A beautiful start to the day. There'll be some high cloud around, but for much of England and Wales, what a cracking start to the weekend. Now, Cumbria, a bit more cloud, and certainly for Scotland and Northern Ireland, it is a cloudier start to the day. That means it's not going to be quite as chilly out there. Temperatures typically in the double figures, but it's fairly dreary over the Highlands, the Grampians, the southern uplands, a lot of low cloud, some patchy rain and drizzle. Brighter skies for the east of Scotland, and certainly for much of England and Wales. We keep the dry and bright weather through the day, some areas of medium and high cloud around, but otherwise it's set fair. Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, increasingly breezy, increasingly damp, and as a result it's not going to feel very pleasant as the winds pick up. But further south, a slightly warmer day compared with Friday, highs of 18 to 19 Celsius. And we keep the fine weather in the south into Saturday night, but the weather front that's causing the damp weather in the northwest tends to sink south into northern England and parts of Wales by Sunday. To the north of that, some showers, and to the south, staying fine. Higher pressure next week.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. There's queues in County Durham. The southbound A1M, junction 63 to 62. That's Chesterless Street to Carville. A collision means a lane closed. Now, the anti-clockwise M60 is currently partially blocked. Junction 13, Worsley to the East Lancs Road to junction 14. Long delays at the scene of a collision. Currently queuing both sides of the carriageway. Northbound M621A, the Croft interchange, so away from the M62 up to Newton Llewellyn to 22. Lane 1's combed off a breakdown causing delays there, and the M6 queuing around Middlewich 18 both ways. And the Great North Road in Stamford in Rutland, the southbound A1 closed from the Tickencote turnoff down towards Stamford. Big delays there at the scene of an ongoing police incident. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome along to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. It's turned into a fine day for many of us. Dry, sunny spells. There is some rain turning up later, and that's because of this weather front coming along from the Atlantic, and it's going to push cloud and outbreaks of rain and a freshening breeze into the west of Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland. But for the vast majority, sunny spells through the rest of the afternoon into the early evening, and then any cloud that does appear through the day tends to fizzle out overnight for England and Wales. As a result, temperatures falling away. Once again, we've got relatively cold air in place, 1 or 2 mist and fog patches. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, the thicker cloud here, outbreaks of rain, mean that it won't be quite as chilly, 10 to 12 Celsius. Meanwhile, temperatures could be close to freezing in some parts of central and southern England and South Wales. But that's where we've got the best of the sunshine first thing. A beautiful start to the day. There'll be some high cloud around, but for much of England and Wales, What a cracking start to the weekend. Now, Cumbria, a bit more cloud, and certainly for Scotland and Northern Ireland, it is a cloudier start to the day. That means it's not going to be quite as chilly out there. Temperatures typically in the double figures, but it's fairly dreary over the Highlands, the Grampians, the southern uplands, a lot of low cloud, some patchy rain and drizzle. Brighter skies for the east of Scotland and certainly for much of England and Wales. We keep the dry and bright weather through the day, some areas of medium and high cloud around, but otherwise it's set fair. Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, increasingly breezy, increasingly damp, and as a result it's not going to feel very pleasant as the winds pick up. But further south, a slightly warmer day compared with Friday, highs of 18 to 19 Celsius. And we keep the fine weather in the south into Saturday night, but the weather front that's causing the damp weather in the northwest tends to sink south into northern England and parts of Wales by Sunday. To the north of that, some showers, and to the south, staying fine. Higher pressure next week.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:40 on this Friday afternoon. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, 7 Rotherham child abusers have been jailed for over 100 years after harrowing crimes against girls. Today's sentencing is the result of a 5-year investigation by the National Crime Agency as part of Operation Stovewood. To get the latest on this, our national reporter Charlie Peters is live for us at Sheffield Crown Court. Charlie, welcome to the show. You've been covering this case since the very beginning. Yesterday, when we spoke, you read out some incredibly moving and impactful victim impact statements that 2 survivors issued to those 7 monsters in court. Today, they finally were handed justice. Charlie Peters, tell us more.
Well, the CPS and the National Crime Agency have both thanked the fortitude and the bravery of the victims for coming forward in this case and to help those investigators to achieve justice. Now, the judge here also thanked the victims for standing up, for bringing forward their testimony and for getting that justice as well. And yesterday, that comes after we saw one of the victims in this case take to the witness box and deliver a very powerful victim impact statement towards the defendants, all 7 of them avoiding her eyes as she told them, "I am your karma. You took my childhood, you took my innocence. Now I am taking your freedom." Extremely emotional and charged atmosphere in the courts as she delivered that powerful statement, with the public gallery, the families of the perpetrators watching down on her as she delivered that statement very boldly, without interruption, reading from notes, but mostly looking at them in the eyes as they tried to avoid her gaze, looking towards me, sometimes in the press gallery, sometimes staring at their families, mostly staring at the floor. Well, now they'll have plenty of time to reflect on what they heard from the victim impact statement in prison, as they were put down for a total of 106 years. Now, those 7 defendants were Mohammed Amar, who was given 14 years imprisonment. Yasser Ajaib was given 6 years. Mohammed Zamir Sadiq, 15 years imprisonment. There was an exasperated shock in the public gallery as that 15 years was handed down. Mohammed Sayab was given a 25-year sentence. He received his sentence via an Urdu interpreter inside the dock. He waved to his family in the public gallery as he was led away, with one of his daughters shouting, "I love you, Dad," as he was taken from the dock. The judge said that he was a persistent and cruel sexual predator. He was 27 at the time of the offending. His victim was just 11 years old, and she detailed during her statement yesterday and in the 9-week trial here that concluded earlier this year how she was trafficked around cemeteries, a nursery, supermarket car parks, hotels and the homes of her abusers to endure the most harrowing and horrific ordeals. The lengthy and relentless abuse that she endured at the hands of up to 150 men before she turned 16. Also sentenced after that lengthy sentence, following a break, Mr. Justice Slater came back and handed down a 24-year prison sentence to Abid Sadiq, who's already facing 20 years in prison from a previous conviction in 2019, also handed down by the same judge, also from an Operation Stovewood National Crime Agency investigation. He was described as a cunning and determined sexual predator. He committed these crimes while under investigation already for separate offences. You knew what you were up to and you continued doing it. That is what the judge said today as he sent him down for 24 years. And then Tahir Yassin was sent to 13 years imprisonment, and Ramin Barry, the last to be sentenced for 8 counts of rape, 9 years imprisonment. Now, the men here convicted of a string of child sexual offences, rape, indecent assault and also trafficking. Many of the charges were so harrowing to hear in court and were summarised again by the lead prosecuting barrister yesterday, who said that the girls were preyed upon and they were vulnerable victims at the hands of these appalling criminals. Now, they will face an extended time in prison. There will also be an extended time on licence once they are released. The National Crime Agency's Operation Stovewood, looking into the historic abuse endured by over 1,400 girls and boys in Rotherham from 1997 to 2014, has achieved several criminal justice victories, but this is almost doubtedly one of their largest. By my research, it's the second largest since the operation was launched in 2014. They've achieved now some 38 convictions, over 250 arrests. They've identified and contacted some 1,150 victims, and their investigations continue apace. Now, that comes after the Alexis J report found that thousands of children in the town had been neglected by the local authorities. They looked the other way due to political correctness. They did not want to rock the boat over community cohesion because so many of the perpetrators were of a British Pakistani background, overrepresented in this kind of abuse in Rotherham. It kicked off a national discussion about child sexual abuse, which has seen more reports from Rochdale, Telford, Newcastle, right across the country, which has been exposed by several investigations. It is an ongoing national scandal, but today, with 106 years handed down, 2 survivors and the wider community that supported them will feel a great sense of justice.
Charlie Peters, I understand you offered some small words of comfort to one of those survivors outside the court today. Charlie, some of the words you read out to me yesterday, they'd simply moved me to tears from those impact statements when one of the girls said, "You started to pass me around as if I was a fresh piece of meat, man to man, city to city." You talked there, Charlie, about one of these girls being exploited by up to 150 men. Now, only 7 men have been sent down today, which asks the question, are all these perpetrators, these monsters, still at large? And Charlie, I have to point out that astonishing comment you made. A sexual predator, a child rapist, a paedophile was just sent down for 25 years, and yet a family member said, "I love you." What planet are they on that they can be like that in the face of such wanton and obvious cruelty and barbarity?
Well, to your first point, are there still several predators out there relating to this case? Yes, absolutely there are. And one of the big frustrations, I think, is that because justice was delayed for so long, hundreds of abusers have escaped the justice that's required. That's been a key problem in Rotherham, in Rochdale, in Telford, across the country when this kind of group localised child sexual exploitation has occurred, because the local authorities missed a chance to achieve what they could at the time of the abuse going on. Today, though, Stuart Cobb, the senior investigating officer, told me that this 5-year investigation was particularly complex, in part because the abuse had happened over 20 years ago. That's when it started. They have to delve in so deep to get and recover as much evidence as they can from that problem, from that period. Now, one of the survivors who today told me that this result was amazing and it was a great day of justice for her, she said yesterday that 20 years ago, her grooming started. 10 years ago, her fight for justice started. Now she finally has it.
Charlie Peters, fantastic reporting, a very, very important story. No matter how difficult it is, the truth must be told, and certainly those girls' truth must be listened to. Thank you, Charlie Peters. Now, gear change now, because coming up, Strictly Come Dancing is back tomorrow, but with seemingly endless scandals surrounding it. What can we expect as it kicks off? We'll have more on that shortly. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Stay-at-home dads, good or bad?
I personally think when you just have a baby, your hormones are all over the place, you're breastfeeding, to go back to work, I feel personally it's a big old thing. And I think babies really need their mums. On the other side, if a stay-at-home dad was a stay-at-home dad for years, I would also say, well, come on now, the children are in school. What's the issue? Why can't you go back to work?
It's really interesting because my husband's been a stay-at-home dad for 6 months and is working part-time. We both work part-time now. And that was always the choice that we were going to make. And it's been the best thing ever for my family. My husband and my daughter have the most incredible bond. He's much more practical, playful, and a better problem solver than me.
I mean, the problem I see, Annette, with all of this is that you do get a lot of women who say, we don't want the stereotype. We don't like the stereotypes. And when men say, well, actually, I want to be the parent staying at home and looking after the child, it's frowned upon. So you can't have it both ways.
I wouldn't say that's a long-term stay-at-home dad. And also, we're talking about actually dads should look after their children, and we shouldn't be praising them and say, oh, they're underappreciated for changing a nappy. That's their duty.
I think it takes real guts as a man to decide that you're going to give up those things that society deems so highly, even if it's for a short time.
Why is it then, Annette, that you say dads should go back to work?
I read an article about a dad who was a stay-at-home dad for 15 years, pursuing his hobbies and fitness and all that. Now, I just don't think that's fair.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates.
You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:51. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, Strictly Come Dancing is foxtrotting back onto our screens tomorrow, but just how can it stay scandal-free this autumn? Well, let's talk about it now. Do the foxtrot with the showbiz journalist Steph Tetchy. Steph, welcome to the show. So, will the scandal dominate this, or can we get back to the entertainment? Tell us more.
Martin, I do think it's going to be a mixture of both here. Now, I think all eyes are going to be on Strictly this weekend, but it's obviously for negative reason. This is a show which over the past few months has been plagued with so many allegations of misconduct from its dancers, bullying, and just so many stories have came out which has overshadowed what is supposed to be one of the best loved programs on TV. It's supposed to be a family program, but now the BBC have a task on their hands because they have to win back the trust of the viewers, and also they have to win the trust of the contestants who are taking part in this series. It's their 20th anniversary, so it's a special one. But the difference with these contestants compared to other contestants in the past is they're going to have chaperones who's going to be with them every single minute of training with their dancers. They're going to have frequent talks with psychologists to see how their mental health is doing. There's also going to be a talent producer for the dancers. So this is very much a series of Strictly Come Dancing, which is going to be heavily policed. And some people say all this for a dance show. But because of all the negative headlines that have come out over the past few months, the BBC have to ensure that this series is unscathed by any attacks or any misbehaviour from their dancers.
Steph, we've just got a quick 30 seconds here. Do you think that this scandal can be put to one side, or do you think really the show is over for Strictly?
The show will go on for Strictly, but I think it's one of those ones, the public are not stupid and the public are not going to forget all the controversies that's happened. It's unfortunately staying the show.
OK, superb stuff. Thank you very much, Steph Decci. The show goes on for now, at least. Thank you very much for joining us here on GB News. Now, stay tuned, because at the top of the next hour, 5 p.m, we are crossing to Los Angeles, to Donald Trump's golf club, of all places, where the Republican presidential nominee is giving his first press conference since that bruising TV debate earlier this week with Kamala Harris. He's expected to come out belting and swinging, as you'd expect. Why would he attack them on immigration, on the economy, and the inside story on that incredible story about Haitian immigrants eating cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio? That's all coming up. Stick with me. I'm Martin Daubney. Now here's your weather with Aidan McGibbon.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome along to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. It's turned into a fine day for many of us. Dry, sunny spells. There is some rain turning up later, and that's because of this weather front coming along from the Atlantic, and it's going to push cloud and outbreaks of rain and a freshening breeze into the west of Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland. But for the vast majority, sunny spells through the rest of the afternoon into the early evening, and then any cloud that does appear through the day tends to fizzle out overnight for England and Wales. As a result, temperatures falling away once again. We've got relatively cold air in place, 1 or 2 mist and fog patches. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, the thicker cloud here, outbreaks of rain, mean that it won't be quite as chilly, 10 to 12 Celsius. Meanwhile, temperatures could be close to freezing in some parts of central and southern England and South Wales. But that's where we've got the best of the sunshine first thing. A beautiful start to the day. Yeah, there'll be some high cloud around, but for much of England and Wales, what a cracking start to the weekend. Now, Cumbria, a bit more cloud, and certainly for Scotland and Northern Ireland, it is a cloudier start to the day. That means it's not going to be quite as chilly out there. Temperatures typically in the double figures, but it's fairly dreary over the Highlands, the Grampians, the southern uplands, a lot of low cloud, some patchy rain and drizzle. Brighter skies for the east of Scotland, and certainly for much of England and Wales. We keep the dry and bright weather through the day, some areas of medium and high cloud around, but otherwise it's set fair. Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, increasingly breezy, increasingly damp, and as a result it's not going to feel very pleasant as the winds pick up. But further south, a slightly warmer day compared with Friday, highs of 18 to 19 Celsius. And we keep the fine weather in the south into Saturday night, but the weather front that's causing the damp weather in the northwest tends to sink south into northern England and parts of Wales by Sunday. To the north of that, some showers, and to the south, staying fine. Higher pressure next week.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Issues in Greater Manchester. Firstly, the westbound M62, Rochdale at junction 20 to Hayward 19. 2 lanes currently coned off, a collision causing queues. Anti-clock M60 from the East Lancs Road at 14 to Worsley at 13. A collision there as well, causing big delays and a lane closure in place. A breakdown northbound M6 from the Croft interchange junction 21A up toward Newton Le Willows at 22. That breakdown causing delays, a lane closure in place. Somerset southbound M5 coming off at Portishead 19. There's a lane blocked on the exit slip there, a breakdown causing big queues. And the westbound M27 in Hampshire, all the traffic on stop Wickham at 10 through towards Fareham junction 9, 2 lanes shut for a car fire. Delays are building. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Hey, very good afternoon to you. I hope you're having a magnificent Friday. It's 5 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. Now, in the next few minutes, brace yourselves, because Donald Trump will deliver a highly anticipated press conference. It's after he refused, of course, to have a second live TV debate with his rival, Kamala Harris. Stay tuned here on GB News. It will most certainly not be one to miss. You never know. Cats and dogs might even be on the menu. Now, speaking of the United States, Keir Starmer has jetted across the pond to offer British armed support to Ukraine. But Vladimir Putin has issued an ominous warning, saying that that will be a declaration of war. GB News will be live from Washington, D.C. as the Prime Minister faces his first major international test. And in a bid to plug a projected £100 billion super black hole in the NHS budgets, the Labour Party is planning to ban fast food TV ads before the 9 p.m. watershed. Now, following, of course, their outdoor smoking ban, is this a sensible nudge towards a healthier nation, or is it Starmer's nanny state on steroids? OK, so all eyes are now on Donald Trump's Los Angeles Golf Club. He's about to give a press conference, will be there. Highly anticipated. Get in touch, usual ways, gbnews.com/your say. But before we go to Trump, it's time for your headlines, and here's Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. The top stories. A man from Sunderland's become the first person to be convicted of riot in the city following the recent disorder across the country. Kieran Usher admitted to charges at Newcastle Crown Court after CCTV captured him leading violence during the Sunderland riots on the 2nd of August. Footage showed the 32-year-old masked, throwing missiles at police and inciting others to join in. The violence caused significant damage to local businesses and forced police officers to briefly retreat. 7 men who committed a string of child sex abuse offences against 2 teenage girls in Rotherham have been jailed for a total of 106 years. The men were all convicted after a 9-week trial, which was the result of an investigation by the National Crime Agency called Operation Stovewood. The victims, who were aged between 11 and 16 at the time of the offences and were both in care, were groomed and often plied with alcohol or cannabis before being assaulted. They would often be collected by their abusers from the children's home where they lived at the time. Over the course of the hearing, these 7 men were handed jail sentences between 7 and 25 years. BBC presenter Jay Blades has been charged with engaging in controlling or coercive behaviour towards his estranged wife. Court documents have revealed his charges include physical and emotional abuse. The 54-year-old appeared in court this morning, and he'll appear in court again on the 11th of October. Russia's claims against 6 British diplomats of espionage and sabotage are completely baseless, according to the Foreign Office. The FSB security service claims the diplomats' actions prompted the response amid what it called numerous unfriendly steps by the UK. It comes as the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, meets the US President Joe Biden in Washington to discuss Ukraine's request to use Western weapons on Russian soil. Concerns over escalation have delayed approval for Ukraine's use of the ballistic missiles. In other news, what would have been the UK's first coal mine in 30 years is now in legal limbo, as planning permission's been quashed by the High Court. Climate campaigners argued the decision to grant planning permission for the Whitehaven coal mine in Cumbria smacked of hypocrisy and contradicted the UK's climate commitments. The government had withdrawn its defence, but developer West Cumbria Mining still contested the claim. However, in today's ruling, the judge said giving the go-ahead for the development was legally flawed. The prison population in England and Wales has dropped by over 2,000 in just 1 week following the start of the government's early release scheme. Today's figures are the first to be published since Labour's plan took effect, reducing the number of prisoners to just over 86,000, down from a record 88,500. Under the scheme implemented this week, about 1,700 inmates were freed who'd served 40% of their sentences. On the 22nd of October, it'll be the turn of those with sentences of 5 years or more, but the government has insisted it won't apply to the most serious offenders like killers, rapists and terrorists. Robert Jenrick's proposing to drastically limit the number of migrants entering the country. The leading candidate for the Conservative Party leadership told GB News' political editor Christopher Hope that he wants to see a cap of just a few thousand people per year if the Conservatives win the next election. He discussed what he called a more controlled and restrictive approach to immigration.
Except that what I'm arguing for will not be plain sailing. It requires a big change in our economy, in our public services, but it is the right thing to do.
It could get down to thousands, could it? Could it a net figure of thousands?
Well, I think we'd have to give that careful thought. But my point is that it should be in the tens of thousands or lower.
2 men have been charged after a Banksy painting was stolen from a London gallery. Larry Fraser and James Love were arrested and charged with burglary following the theft. The girl with balloon painting, which partially self-destructed during a £1.1 million auction, was recovered and will be returned to the gallery. Banksy's artwork has recently faced a string of threats, with several pieces moved for safekeeping. The 47-year-old and 53-year-old will appear in court next month. And the former US President Donald Trump says he's done debating and won't participate in another head-to-head before the November election, despite polls showing Kamala Harris won their first face-off. Several top Republicans said Harris came out on top, with one poll showing 53% of voters agree. Over 67 million viewers tuned in for that debate, but Harris insists voters deserve a rematch, calling for another round. However, the majority of registered voters believe one debate was enough. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. I'll be back in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, in the next few minutes, Donald Trump will hold a hugely anticipated press conference at his Los Angeles golf club. Now, this comes, of course, as the former president says he will not take part in any more TV debates against his rival, Kamala Harris. You can see there, that's the scene at Donald Trump's golf course. There's the microphone. He's about to step into there. These are live images. We're waiting for the presidential nominee for the Republican Party, Donald Trump, to step into frame. We'll cross to that, of course, the moment it happens. But before we head back to that, joining me in the studio is the spokesperson for the Republicans Overseas UK, Jennifer Ewing. Jennifer, welcome to the show. So we're expecting Donald Trump's turn up any moment now. Let's start with that line came out today, and that is there won't be a second TV debate against Kamala Harris. A lot of people saying that's because Donald Trump convincingly lost the first time around and they're calling him a scaredy cat. Is that the case, or is it because Donald Trump can't actually get a fair hearing? The last debate seemed to be 3 versus 1.
True. And I think there's a multitude of things going on. I think anyone that objectively watched that would have said Kamala Harris absolutely won on polish, on presentation, on preparation. However, what she didn't win on was policy, right? Like, we still don't know very much more about her policies. But yes, I think you'd say she definitely outperformed him and that she wasn't a complete failure. So you have to think, what is the upside in Trump doing another debate? Most people, he's been in the public eye, not just politically, but, from his sort of television shows and his real estate for many, many years. Everybody knows everything there is to know, both good and bad, about former President Trump. What we don't know about is Kamala Harris. So I can definitely see why she would want to do another debate, because she has to get her messages on whatever her policies are. Still very unclear whether it's like on the fracking, which was so important. You heard that a lot in Pennsylvania the other night. Whether it is on, you know, her terrible, terrible record at the border. I don't know how she's going to disassociate herself from that. Or the fact that in the last week we had the New York Times Siena College poll, which said for this election, 61% of Americans want to see a change from the way the country is being run. Now, 53% of people associate President Trump with major change, and only 25% associate Kamala Harris with major change. So she needs to continue to remove herself away from basically the fact that she's been the vice president for the last 3.5 years and is associated with the terrible economy and the crisis at the southern border that she's been in charge of. So
a lot of people have been saying that Donald Trump was very easily goaded, very easily distracted during that first debate. You know, Kamala Harris went into prosecutor mode, and he seemed to take the bait all the time. And he said after the debate that actually what he needs to do is keep the conversation on those precise topics you mentioned. He needs to keep up about immigration, that porous southern border. I mean, we hear figures as high as like 10, 11 plus million come over that border illegally. That's a huge amount. It's like 2 Londons have just poured into America in the last 4 years. And also on the economy, Kamala Harris can't keep banging on about, I will bring grocery prices down. You're in charge now. Do it now.
No, you're right. And a couple of things. I would agree for sure. And you used the right term, Martin. He was easily distracted that night. He fell into a few of the traps she set. Definitely the one about the size of the rallies. Yeah. That seems to be a sensitive issue for him. I wish it wasn't, because nobody cares about it, right? But you're right. He went off piste there. What he should have done, and the moderators, interestingly, set it up for him very well when they asked her that first question, are people's lives better off today than they were 4 years ago? She went off on some tangent about her passion being small businesses. Don't know what that means. Trump should have, rather than just go directly into his tariffs, which he loves to talk about, said she didn't answer that question. Yeah. And most people know their lives were not better off. With regard to inflation, now, audiences or the average person who's not a political junkie might be thinking, well, you know, post-lockdown, post-supply chain issues, everybody's got inflation. However, the fact is, Kamala Harris signed and was the tie-breaking vote in the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which actually was tons of spending for a mini New Green Deal and caused inflation, right? So that's one thing. And then the crisis at the southern border, you mentioned 10.4 illegal immigration. It's not legal. We're great with legal migration, but illegal. And that is compared to, under Trump's 4 years, 2.4 million. And we know that Kamala Harris is tied to that, because when she and Joe Biden got into office, they, in their first several days, put a line through over 91 of Trump's border policies: remain in Mexico.
And what's this astonishing piece of information I heard about the Democratic Party is considering giving all those people an amnesty if they get into power? That's an astonishing thing to happen. More is writing off their illegal entry into the country. Donald Trump saying that's because they want to vote Democrat. Can that surely be the case?
Well, you're right. You have a Democrat say that, senior Democrats, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi. As a matter of fact, you know, the same Democrats that are so senior, they were, you know, part of the reason Biden got pushed off a cliff a few weeks ago and Kamala was coronated. But that is the goal. Because of the way a census is being done, they're going to put them in certain blue states and it'll redraw the map. Now, part of what people aren't completely understanding is in the old way of the American dream, and I'll give you an example of my home state of California, where we have tons and tons of legal Mexican, South American, you know, immigrants who have come through, legally waited in line, raised their families. They're the ones that are getting hurt by all of this illegal immigration, because they did the right thing, and now there's just people who their first thing upon entering our country is to break the law. I mean, I don't understand how anyone can overlook that.
And it's absolutely true. My sister lives in Texas. Her partner is Mexican, and the Mexican that came in and played the system correctly and like law-abiding taxpayers, they're cheesed off about this too, because of course they're all tarnished with the same brush. There's a huge conversation that was missed actually in 2016 about Latinos voting for Trump, and I suspect that will be the same again. Jennifer, we have to talk about this extraordinary story this week that Donald Trump went off on one, has to be said, about Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio. He said they're eating cats. They're eating dogs. This turned into, since, a wild conspiracy theory. The liberal media trying to poo-poo this as Trump, what's he been smoking? In actual fact, I had Steve Gill on the show earlier this week. He's a former advisor to the Clinton campaign, to the Bush campaign. He said that this is happening. They're all immigrants in America eating cats and dogs. Is that true?
It is, and let's just briefly let your audience know the quick background of the story. Springfield, Ohio. Keep in mind, J.D. Vance, the vice presidential candidate, is the senator for Ohio. It is a town of 60,000 people. Under Kamala Harris, 20,000 Haitian migrants got something called temporary protection status.
So that's
TPS.
bigger than the actual population of the town.
Well, 20,000 to 60,000, right? So
okay.
one third. So they moved these people in, albeit legally, but they probably shouldn't have been done that fast. And all sorts of things have happened. As you can imagine, I'm sure there's some relation to what goes on here in the UK. The social services are overrun. The schools are overrun. The crime goes up. And yes, because of the vast cultural differences, and people do eat animals in that way, pets, in Haiti, there have been reports. This has been going on for months. It's been talked about in the town halls. There is an actual 911 call that was reported with regards to a goose in a pond. So I know what people are doing is they're trying to say fake news, and this just makes Trump sound deranged, but it is a much bigger issue. These people of these town, like, as Hillary Clinton famously called people like this, the deplorables in the flyover states, they're asking for help. And if it takes a cat meme or a dog meme or some exaggerated stories, which are true, so be it. At least we're talking about it.
Jennifer, they're just doing a quick sound check there. It looks like Donald Trump's arrival is imminent. But ahead of that, I read an astonishing report. The world's media, of course, has descended on Springfield, Ohio, to try and fact-check this. But a side story, I saw an incredible confession from a truck driver, a forklift driver who worked in a factory in Springfield. He was saying that there is an immigration problem here, but it's not the one that the media is talking about cats and dogs. It's about the fact that we're all losing our jobs. He was saying he was making $21 an hour, making great money, bringing up his family in the town. Suddenly you ship in 20,000 immigrants from outside. They were working for far less, often half times the price. They're losing their jobs because they're being undercut in the job market. Jennifer, that is something that British viewers will totally empathise with. That's what we were subjected to in the pre-Brexit years when the floodgates were open to the continent. And we had so many viewers contacting us before I was even on GB News. Truck drivers, factory workers, brickies, plasterers who are being undercut, being forced out of business, a very, very real issue. So the media is trying to make it about cats and dogs. In actual fact, it's a simple supply and demand, cut price labour, hammering ordinary, hard-working American taxpayers.
No, you're exactly right. And there is a direct comp with the UK. I've lived in London for 20 years. I know exactly those issues you're talking about. And it is very easy for a Haitian migrant to go to work for half the price when the government is giving you the housing. There was a really sad story the other night about a vet, somebody who had served our country in the United States, and he was saying, you don't see any homeless Haitians in Springfield, right? But you do see homeless vets because there's been that whole reverse, the government's looking after all these different people. And why has in this story it turned out that the people going to their city hall asking for help, saying, what else can we do? Why are they the bad people? And this is going to backfire because this is exactly how Trump won in 2016, was sticking up for the people, often in poor towns, often in forgotten towns. Again, Hillary Clinton called them deplorables. Trump and J.D. Vance are listening to these people and sticking up for these people. And if the media wants to mock them and call these, actually, that one story wasn't true because it was in a different town, or it was a goose, not a cat. I mean, totally not the issue.
Yeah.
The issue is what you're talking about, this migration problem.
And it's especially true still in the United Kingdom. You know, you're absolutely right. This week we saw the winter fuel allowance cut for 10 million British pensioners, feeling at the back of the queue when it comes to where the resources go. 8 million pounds a day being spent on hotels for asylum seekers, £6.6 billion per year on the asylum system here in the UK, and it's £4 billion per year being spent on unemployment benefits for asylum seekers who often, a lot of them came here illegally. How important are those kind of things? I'm expecting one of the big things to come out of this press conference today is that Donald Trump wants to get it back onto these issues, back on where he knows he's strong, back on where he knows he can win, back on where he knows he can cause damage to Kamala Harris.
No, you're right. And even going into that debate the other night, and I don't imagine, we won't have the real poll numbers for probably another week once they're built in that debate. But going into it, Trump still outperforms Harris on the economy. I believe it's 20 points, and on immigration, 14 points. Okay, so those are his issues. And those are two of the top voting issues for American people come November. And she's very weak on both of those. And it's not like she's some newcomer. She is the incumbent. A lot of people, if you listen to the DNC, would have thought, you know, he was the incumbent. No. The fact is, Trump was a better president than Kamala Harris was vice president. And if people stick to the kitchen table issues, then that will help Donald Trump win.
Can I ask you, Jennifer Ewing, this election, like most American elections, comes down to actually a very small handful of voters in the swing states. Just that's the peculiar notion of the way the electoral system works in America. Is anybody out there still undecided? I mean, everybody knows Donald Trump. There can't be a single person on the planet who doesn't have an opinion on Donald Trump. Everybody knows now Kamala Harris, although less people do. She's been kept locked away for a number of years, but now she's front and centre. Not a great deal of policy yet, not a great deal of meat on the bone in terms of what the actual offering is. More of an emotion. It's a feel-good thing. It's smiley. And, hey, it's not Joe Biden. So it's not an old guy that Donald Trump must be missing him, like the desert misses the rain, because that guy would have been so easy to beat. But are there anybody out there, Jennifer, that haven't made their mind up yet? Are these votes still worth fighting for?
Absolutely. And that is what it'll come down to, is a very small amount of votes. I mean, 20,000, 10,000, 5,000 in these 7 swing states. Probably the number one I think everyone would agree on, which is Pennsylvania. And that's why Kamala Harris has had to flip-flop so much on fracking, because I believe there's over 500,000 people who rely on fracking for their jobs. So, look, there are people who will not have made up their mind, but there will be people, you know, Trump supporters will walk through glass for him. And then there are also a lot of people, whether you want to call it Trump derangement syndrome or just cannot stand the man. They could be former Republicans, as we've seen with Dick Cheney and some of these others, or they could be people who would just lean more left, who doesn't matter what they heard the other night, they're voting for Kamala Harris. So that is not who those debates were for the other night. It certainly wasn't for me, right? Or somebody maybe on the far left, the Taylor Swift. It wasn't for the Taylor Swifts of the world. It's for those undecided voters. And I think what it's going to come down to is, are they looking for these vibes, you know, and emotion as you talk about, or are they looking at, hey, what's going to shut my border and help me get back on track, lower inflation? We had 4 years of peace and prosperity, and that's what it'll come down to. Which one of those two things are more important?
OK, all to play for, all to fight for. Stay with us. We are expecting Donald Trump to arrive imminently, but first, we'll take a break. Stick with us.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nana are queer. Weekends from 3 p.m.
So, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are non-crime hate incidents a breach of your human rights?
It's crazy, isn't it? Freedom of speech is now on life support here, and we've had, in the last week alone, we've had Elon Musk being threatened. He's now out of Brazil with X. We've had the founder of Telegram basically being arrested, and he's been charged in France. We're not quite sure the circumstances why he was there, whether Macron invited him to the Olympics or whatever, but he's been arrested under several charges. And we've had all sorts of people who've been speaking out are basically being shut down. So it has to be freedom of thought. It has to be freedom of expression. It's one of our fundamental rights under the Human Rights Act of 1998. Article 10 gives you the right to express your opinion and also to air that publicly.
It's basically I say something that somebody doesn't like, so probably one of my monologues. Then somebody can then inform the police that I've upset them in some way. And then that goes on my record, so I now have a criminal record.
Yes.
Because somebody else who I've never met, who's never met me, has heard something that upset or hurt your feelings. Then if I go for a certain job or I go for my DBS check, which I do regularly because I go and talk in schools, somebody could pull that up and go, well, you did something that had hurty feelings, and so now you can't have that job. That has got to be a breach of my human rights.
Oh, it's absolutely. Article 10, it's a fundamental right to protect your freedom of speech and so on and so forth. And this is what's really worrying, because it's happening around the world, as I say, in Brazil, in France, in various other countries. In America, you know, Zuckerberg, he came out in the last few days and said the pressure that he was put under by the Biden administration, first of all about COVID, and even jokes he was told to suppress them. The other thing that he was saying about the Hunter Biden laptop. And he said he couldn't speak about that because they were telling him not to. And what he did, he had to fact check, and he turned around and said he regretted that, because the reality is you're working on that sort of basis.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the show. It's 5:25 on this Friday afternoon now. You can see on your pictures live pictures from Los Angeles, where Donald Trump is about to hold a press conference at his golf club. We're still waiting for the big man. We've had a couple of sound checks, but of course, cross that the moment that Donald Trump steps out. Highly anticipated response after, of course, that ABC live TV debate earlier this week with Kamala Harris. A lot of people believe that the Democratic nominee won that debate. And I'm joined in the studio here still by Jennifer Ewing, the spokesperson for Republicans Overseas UK. So, Jennifer, one of the huge issues, the difference of opinion, of course, is on the environment, net zero. In the UK today, the first proposed coal mine in 30 years has been blocked by the Labour Party. The outgoing Conservative Party wanted that to go on. Net zero is a big deal this side of the pond. People feel that their bills are going up, and we're scared to death of energy costs. We're scared to death of the pension credit being cut this week, the winter fuel allowance in Britain. The price of heating our homes, the price of driving our cars is a huge issue. How big a deal is that in America? And when we look at the difference of policy, Kamala Harris is basically a net zero zealot, right?
Yep.
And Donald Trump, well, he's all about drill, baby, drill. How big a deal is this to American voters?
Yeah, it's a very big deal, as a matter of fact. And it's funny, I was just home in California last week, and I was talking to people about the different issues, and my brother-in-law was complaining about his summer water bill. But I said, what about your guys' heating, electricity bills? And it's not as big of a deal as it is here. I think in the UK, we've been gaslit into thinking that energy prices are through the roof everywhere. And no.
Well, they are.
No, but they're not everywhere. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like in America, it is nowhere as bad as it is in the United Kingdom.
But,
right?
But gas, my sister lives in Texas, gas is massively more expensive now than it was even a few years ago.
Absolutely. But the home energy bills, I think, are way worse in this country because of policies taken in this country. Now, to go back to Kamala Harris, you're right. She wants to stop fracking. They stopped the Keystone Pipeline, as you'll recall. They've taken away licenses, which disincentivizes oil and gas companies to invest and build new things. Look, we all want renewable energy one day, but we're just not there yet. So if you ask the average American, and I would compare this to even a more conservative Brit, if they are going to give up their luxuries, their air conditioning, their heat, their car, their gasoline, they will say, I'm an American, I work way too hard, I pay way too many taxes, and I'm not going to live in discomfort for the sake of something that may or may not change the degree of the planet. So they're not interested in that.
And you mentioned fracking, and Kamala Harris has done a U-turn on fracking. Pennsylvania, you mentioned, is one of those swing states where a small number of votes will give that electoral college chunk. So Pennsylvania is key. Fracking is a big issue there because there are huge resources in fracking in Pennsylvania. And a few years ago, Kamala Harris said that she would stop fracking. Now she's trying to desperately do a U-turn on that. Will the voters wash with that? Or is this an area where you expect Donald Trump will attack her?
Well, actually, it was one of the good points he had the other night. He said if she becomes president, fracking will cease to exist in Pennsylvania. And he's not making this up. All you have to do is go watch videos of her saying that, especially when she unsuccessfully ran for president in 2020. So, no, she loves all this net zero stuff. And she does not want to see energy, basically, not only independence, but, you know, dominance, how we had under Trump. Because let's not forget, it's just about filling your car with gas or heating your home or having an air conditioning. It's about national security. You know, anybody, I remember in this country, I can't remember who it was, but who had the position of, he was the net zero guy and he was the energy policy guy. And it's like, how can you do... how can you... No, it's somebody on the conservative side, but how can you do both? Yeah. Because in order to have national security, you need to have energy security, which I think the UK is doing a terrible job at. And if Trump does not get re-elected, I think the US will continue to do a terrible job at.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Britons, certainly on the Conservative side of the political divide, would love to be more dependent on British sovereign energy. Of course, our Labour Party is withdrawing North Sea gas licences today. As I said, in Whitehaven, the High Court threw out the plan for a new coal mine to open. Can I talk about price controls as well? Like, Donald Trump has been calling Kamala Harris a communist, and we've seen our Labour Party in this country this week saying they're going to look at rent controls, so private landlords won't be able to increase their prices more than twice a year. Now, on the face of it, that sounds like a good idea if you rent, but of course, property owners are saying that's going to be a nightmare. They'll simply pass those prices on in other ways. So there's a supply and demand problem in the UK. Loads more people want houses than we can supply. Big part of that, of course, is 685,000 net immigration in 1 year. And also, there was talk about price controls, governmental price controls on groceries. Now, this is starting to feel a lot like socialism. In fact, Donald Trump said this is Kamala Harris. Is there anything in that? Are they really trying to control the land of the free, the great capitalist engine of the planet? They're trying to put state-sanctioned controls in?
So I think what happened and what you're referring to is several weeks because Kamala Harris did not actually have a policy page until last Sunday on her website. So she was testing a few policies. The first one was about the evil grocery stores who are jacking up all of these, the prices on our groceries, and that's what's causing inflation. We know only governments, by printing money, can cause inflation, so that's factually incorrect. To take on top of that, these grocery store manufacturers, they have a very small margin. So when she started to talk about, we have to stop these grocery stores price gouging, even economists on the left were like, slow your roll, like that's absolutely...
That's like Cuba.
It's Cuba, and as far as rent control, I mean, that has never worked in the past. All it's going to do is take the much-needed good landlords, and they're going to say, why bother? You know, why bother? You know, whether it's you can't raise it to cover your own mortgage, your own higher gas bills, higher insurance, whatever, the very, expensive things when you are a landlord. So price gouging doesn't work. We need the free market. And obviously, rent controls do not work. So that's nonsense. And Americans will see through that.
Now, Donald Trump has got something of a bromance going on with Elon Musk.
Yep.
In fact, he said he's going to offer him a position if he were to be made president. Now, Musk has been saying some incredible things on social media about how this election, he's referring to that porous border and the ever-changing makeup of the American population. If this isn't curtailed at current sort of projections, you're looking at a very, very, very different America, even in 4 or 5 years' time. He says this is the last election to try and save America as it currently stands. Is that an exaggeration, or is there something in the fact that if Donald Trump doesn't get in now, then because of the huge inpouring of South Americans through that border, that America could be forever changed if Trump doesn't get in?
Sure. So I think statements on either side that say if this candidate doesn't win, it's the end of America. You know, both sides have said things like that. I hope my country is strong enough to sustain whoever gets into office. However, what he's saying, and it's very clear, and I've paid attention to this, comparing it to the UK over the last few years. For the most part, immigrants into America, which we are a country made of immigrants for the last almost 250 years, they get to America, they either already speak English, want to learn to speak English, they put their children into, you know, the schools, they want to become part of the culture, they hang the American flag, they're American. They are so proud to be American. Again, go around any sort of California where you've got these wonderful first, second, third generation Mexican families with small businesses, they're Christians, they have kids, they are Americans, okay? I think what Elon Musk is referring to is if we start letting people in, let's take the Haitians, for example, who have diametrically opposed values and views to us. And that does not mean it's the same religion or the same race or anything like that. Just values, right? Of freedom and, you know, you do you, I'll do me, let's not hurt each other. That's clearly not happening in a lot of cases with these Venezuelan illegal criminals. Trump's not wrong about that. A lot of the crime in Venezuela has gone down because of the illegal people who have come across the border and the crimes that have been committed, murders, people taking over apartment buildings in Colorado. That's all fact. So those are not people who are coming in to our country as good actors because they want to be part of the American dream. In this country, I notice oftentimes things seem to be a little more separate, where people come in and they stay in their group. You know, they don't necessarily learn to speak English. And then the country, the United Kingdom, seems to cater to that rather than say, hey, there is nothing wrong with flying the Union Jack. There's nothing wrong with being patriotic and saying, I'm so grateful to be in the United Kingdom because wherever I came from was, you know, not as great, and I want to be a part of this culture and this community.
Yeah, we do a bit more of that, the American dream. Let's have a bit more of the British dream now. As you can expect, you know, this is Donald Trump's party. He can be late if he wants to. That's his golf club in LA. He's probably pressing his trousers, having a bite to eat, but he is on his way. We've been guaranteed. We're waiting with anticipation. He's making us wait. He's keeping us keen by being slightly mean. We'll be back to Los Angeles with Donald Trump, hopefully very shortly. Stay with us.
Hello, welcome along to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. It's turned into a fine day for many of us. Dry, sunny spells. There is some rain turning up later, and that's because of this weather front coming along from the Atlantic, and it's going to push cloud and outbreaks of rain and a freshening breeze into the west of Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland. But for the vast majority, sunny spells through the rest of the afternoon into the early evening, and then any cloud that does appear through the day tends to fizzle out overnight for England and Wales. As a result, temperatures falling away once again. We've got relatively cold air in place, 1 or 2 mist and fog patches. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, the thicker cloud here, outbreaks of rain, mean that it won't be quite as chilly, 10 to 12 Celsius. Meanwhile, temperatures could be close to freezing in some parts of central and southern England and South Wales. But that's where we've got the best of the sunshine first thing. A beautiful start to the day. There'll be some high cloud around, but for much of England and Wales, what a cracking start to the weekend. Now, Cumbria, a bit more cloud, and certainly for Scotland and Northern Ireland, it is a cloudier start to the day. That means it's not going to be quite as chilly out there. Temperatures typically in the double figures, but it's fairly dreary over the Highlands, the Grampians, the southern uplands, a lot of low cloud, some patchy rain and drizzle. Brighter skies for the east of Scotland and certainly for much of England and Wales. We keep the dry and bright weather through the day, some areas of medium and high cloud around, but otherwise it's set fair. Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, increasingly breezy, increasingly damp, and as a result it's not going to feel very pleasant as the winds pick up. But further south, a slightly warmer day compared with Friday, highs of 18 to 19 Celsius. And we keep the fine weather in the south into Saturday night, but the weather front that's causing the damp weather in the northwest tends to sink south into northern England and parts of Wales by Sunday. To the north of that, some showers, and to the south, staying fine. Higher pressure next week.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon to you. My name is Johnny Ratner. There are long delays on the westbound carriageway of the M62 through Greater Manchester. 2 lanes are out of action between junction 20 and 19. So this is just to the west of Rochdale, and the scene of an accident is taking just shy of half an hour to get through. Meanwhile, the M5 is down to a single lane heading south of Birmingham between the Frankley services and junction 4. The A38 Bromsgrove Stourbridge exit, a lorry's broken down, it's being recovered. It's taking about half an hour to get through. On the Essex stretch of the M25, the inside lane's blocked off anti-clockwise just before the M11 following a collision. And on the Kent stretch, a lane's closed anti-clockwise just before the Darrenfinch change following a collision. And trains are suspended on the Great Western Railway line between Plymouth and Gunners Lake due to those emergency bridge works. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back, 5:39 with me, Martin Daubney on GB News. We're on the final furlong today. Now, I've been teasing for the entire hour long enough. You know now we're expecting Donald Trump to give a press conference in the next few minutes there at his golf club in Los Angeles. It's his party and he's keeping us waiting. So let's have a quick change of pace. Of course, we'll cut back to Trump if and when he appears. But before that, the decision to approve the UK's first coal mine in 30 years has today been thrown out by the High Court. Climate campaigners launched legal action over plans for the Whitehaven coal mine in Cumbria, arguing the decision to grant planning permission contradicted the UK's climate commitments. Well, joining me now to discuss this is the leader of the Climate Party, Ed Gemmell. Ed, welcome to the show. I suppose you're delighted at this decision. Another nail in the coffin of Britain's energy sovereignty plans. It would have offered thousands of jobs when you added together the supply chain and the local community. Well-paid jobs, 80% of which were going to locals. The Conservative Party, the previous parliamentarian in that area, supported the plans, but the Green lobby groups today got a victory because the Labour Party simply stood aside. It's another death knell, is it not, for British energy sovereignty?
We start an agreement, Martin. Yes, I am absolutely delighted about it. I mean, in fact, the thought that we were even going to have this coal mine made me so angry. I mean, really, it's regressive. It was going back to go into old areas, an industry that's dying, and we should have been moving forward on it. I mean, it was also going to admit 220 million tonnes of carbon dioxide. That's the equivalent of half of Britain's emissions in 1 year for the entire country. It was madness. And the fact that lawyers could go in and try and argue that, in fact, it was going to be a net zero coal mine. I mean, for goodness sake, the word moronic comes up, doesn't it? I mean, how could you possibly argue that a coal mine is going to be net zero? But Martin,
I'll answer that question for you again. Well, the answer is very simple, and that is, at the moment, we are importing coal from all around the world still. You can see there, literally, there used to be a cliche, selling coal to Newcastle. That's precisely what we do. We import energy from all around the world, from South America, from Australia even, because like your Olympic, we are still dependent on fossil fuels, and this would have been energy sovereignty, so no shipping, and that coal is still mined in a different country and it's still burned. So on that point, they had a point, Ed Gemmell.
What they didn't have the point on is that it was net zero, because you can't emit 220 million tonnes and mean net zero. So that's utter rubbish. I think the secondary bit about it is we're importing, they talk about coking coal here coming from this particular mine. And if we need to import it, we'll import it, but we don't need to. I mean, we've got Port Talbot, That is now going to go to an electric arc furnace. It won't even be there as a customer. We've only got 2 or 3 of these places that could be customers for it in the future. But it's worse than that. I mean, look at what the Office for Budget Responsibility told us yesterday. We're going to triple our national debt by 2070. Triple it. We're already massively in debt to the extent of our GDP. And if we want to get out of it, the OBR actually said what we've got to do is increase our economy. And it showed that a difference between a 1.5% increase in our economy, in our productivity, and a 2.5% would actually be the difference between tripling our national debt and actually reducing it by about 40%. And the biggest business opportunity on the planet is getting to net zero. Everyone's doing it. 93% of the world's GDP under net zero commitments. Why? Why do I have to get so angry to get people to take off their blindfolds and see that Britain should be leading this? We must lead this.
Ed Gammo, how about if you remove your blindfold about rather than having everything to be net zero, which is provably driving up the cost of energy? We were told by the Labour Party our energy bills would go down 300 quid. The winter fuel allowance has just been axed last week, and our energy bills, we've been told, are now going to increase. A lot of people say a more common sense and balanced portfolio would be to have more North Sea gas. We import billions of dollars worth of gas in a liquefied manner. There's a huge amount of energy goes into that, plus it's shipped here, and like it or lump it, we can't run the country off windmills and solar panels. The wind stops, the sun goes in.
Yeah, but again, this is because of short-sightedness going back decades. We've got tidal power and wave power and nuclear.
But it costs a fortune to harness that. If it was so easy, we'd have done it by now.
But Martin, it only costs a fortune because we haven't done it for 30 years. Why are the other things getting cheaper? Because what we do is we innovate, we bring it in, we scale it, we get it onto a manufacturing line so it comes out industrially and prices go down. What we haven't done with Tide, and we could be a world leader in Tide. And if we had done it before the Ukraine war, we would have been a net exporter of energy, making billions for the British economy, as were areas of Germany that were already, far further ahead on their renewables. And we could then be exporting the technology. We have 20 gigawatts of Tide here, but it's only one example. Again, this coking coal issue from today brings us onto that thing of the idiocy of what we're doing at Port Talbot. Why are the Swedish bringing in?
OK, so I'll interject on that point. So the coking coal at Whitehaven was going to be of a very high quality, and it could be sold internationally, because we might be driven by net zero Zeltra here, which prevents us from making our own strategically important high-grade steel by coking here. So we have to melt down washing machines to produce inferior steel at Port Talbot. That's the fact of the matter. But the high-quality steel we depend on, we're just importing from around the world. Well, they still use coking coal in a different place. Okay. That pollution just happens to go elsewhere. So we could sell coal, mine domestically, overseas, and make a packet for the local community. By the way, I come from a coal mining community. I'm a coal miner's son. My dad was down the pit 47 years. Our communities thrived. They were active. They were fully employed. They were thriving communities. Now they've been decimated. And today is another nail in the coffin of working class Britain.
But that's why we need to build our industry. But let's get back to your first point. You had actually said that we're now going to be exporting all this coke. When you've been arguing before that we were going to be importing it here. So we can't be doing it. We can't be doing it all. But the second part about it,
it's called making money from natural resources.
But we have to be making from the resources that are renewable, that we have vast amounts from, not from the things that cost us more. I mean, at the moment, why does our electricity cost us more? It's because we haven't invested enough in renewables. I mean, wind and solar are half the price of gas-generated electricity. When? It is nuts to keep coming out with this argument.
When will the prices come down, Ed?
Yeah, the prices for the gas aren't coming down quickly enough to catch up with wind and solar.
Because we have to import it, and we're at the mercy of international markets and tyrants and warfare. If we had our own domestic gas supply, this wouldn't happen. Look at America.
But what we're doing is we're going ahead with something which is dying. There is a clean industrial revolution going on where Britain could get ahead. We bring forward our net zero target. We roll up our sleeves. The city does the investment. If you put the net zero target further enough forward and you have strategic policy, then private investment drives it. We don't need to use government money. And when we look at this OBR threat, talking about our our debt to GDP ratio going up to an unsustainable level. Last year, we had a CBI report coming out showing that we had a 9% growth in our net zero economy. and a 0.1% growth in our real economy. That would be driving jobs in industry.
We have to leave it there. It's been a great debate. If we could channel all the energy and hot air coming out of the pair of us, we might be able to power a power station ourselves. Always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you very much. Now, as I say, in the next few minutes, Donald Trump will, I assure you, hold a press conference at his Los Angeles golf club. It comes as the former president says he will not take part in any more TV debates against his rival Kamala Harris. And we'll have the full reaction to that after this.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Many happy memories, and 9 in 10 Brits say certain foods evoke feelings of childhood nostalgia, with the mousse-like powdered dessert, Angel Delight, the most loved. Joining us now...
I'm surprised by that.
Yeah, well, Angel Delight?
I'm surprised it's number one. Yes, very surprised. Well, to talk us through all of this is creator of the Crazy Sexy Food podcast, Hannah Harley-Young. Morning.
Hi. I've brought a selection of things that really define my childhood, particularly the Viennetta ice cream. And I have brought you some butterscotch Angel Delight.
Yay!
I'm going to expose myself live on camera and say that I've never tried Angel Delight.
Hannah?
I know. I don't know what that says about me.
I thought that was apple puree, actually. I'm so excited. Is it good?
Oh, my goodness.
Did I make it okay?
Oh, yeah. But to be fair, Hannah, it's not that hard to make.
Well, what is it, though? That's what's so funny about Angel Delight.
It's chemicals. It's just chemicals in a bag.
I mean, it's a load of additives, which, I mean, one thing that's also really interesting about all these nostalgic foods when you look at them is that a lot of things have been discontinued over the years.
Oh, dear.
So it makes you wonder, how did this one kind of get through the cracks?
Angel Delight came out number one, didn't it?
It did come out as number one. And also sort of in the top 5 was fish and chips, something I still eat today. Fish fingers, still a staple of my diet. Mr. Whippy, in that same survey, they said that 95% of people find that a taste from their childhood will take them back more than looking at a photo. And that's something that's really interesting for me, and it's the basis of everything that I do, and the reason really why I set up Crazy Sexy Food, or one of the reasons, should I say, was that I love this concept of memories of food. You know, I've interviewed hundreds of people over the past 5 years, and when I get to that question, you actually see their face relaxing, and there's something that it evokes emotion.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 10 to 6 on this beautiful Friday afternoon. Now, in the next few minutes, Donald Trump will, I assure you, hold a press conference at his Los Angeles golf club. It comes as the former president says he will not take part in any more TV debates against his rival Kamala Harris. We've got some live pictures to show you there of that podium awaiting the presidential nominee for the Republican Party, anticipated to arrive any moment, honest governor. Now, joining me in the studio to discuss this is the spokesperson for Republicans Overseas UK, Jennifer Ewing. Jennifer, so we've been on tenterhooks waiting for Donald Trump to come out.
You invited me under false pretenses. You promised President Trump.
But he keeps us waiting. But look, on a serious point, the TV debate on ABC this week, by most metrics, you admit yourself that Kamala Harris got the upper hand in that. Donald Trump has decided not to do any more of those. And instead, he says, pulling it back into areas he knows he does well, such as illegal immigration and the economy. Do you think that this pulling out of the debates is a sign that he's scared, or is it a case of just focus on where you're good, where you're going to win, and try and hammer home the message that it's by voting for me is the chance to save America?
Sure. So I believe that Donald Trump agreed to 2 different debates that were completely under the Democrat terms.
Yeah.
The first one early in June with Biden. They let the Democrats choose the network. The Democrats chose all of the rules.
And he decimated Joe Biden.
And he decimated Joe Biden. Yes. That was very consequential. And then, indeed, the Democrats, when they coronated Kamala Harris, said, we'd like to do another one. And they chose the network, ABC, very, very favorable to the Harris and the Democrats. And by the way, that's not just me saying this. We had reports come out about ABC before the debate that 97% of their coverage has been favorable to Kamala Harris.
And Donald Trump was saying it was...
had been negative to Trump. Okay, so there is a bias there, right? That's before we had the actual debate. So, and then also they kept the same rules that the Democrats had decided. So I guess you have to ask, what is the upside in his doing another debate?
Yeah.
People know everything they need to know